tonight to see if he was barefoot. Is that still the case? Is he barefoot? Because I know on Facebook somebody posted a picture of these could be his shoes, or is that so he is presumed to be barefoot at this point?
What I can say is that his mom says all of his shoes are accounted for at the house. I'm not going to say that he's barefoot.
All right.
Allegedly!
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is Lady Freedom here coming at you with another raw narrative. Here's a brief disclaimer for tonight's show. Let's watch.
That's ignorant! Allegedly, that's ignorant! Ignorant!
Judgment, Austin.
Oi, you read my thoughts. You've got the shinin.
You mean shining?
Shh, you wanna get sued?
Judgment, Austin.
You just use that shin of yours to call me and I'll come a-running. But don't be reading my mind between 4 and 5. That's Willie's time.
Hey, yo, boss. I love it when he does that.
And welcome back to my channel. This is Lady Freedom here coming at you with another raw narrative. And I see everyone in here tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. Cuckoo Kachoo. I saw Scrit and Strangler, Megan Els. I saw Gypsy Doll, Connie S, Meow, Alicia Hot Wheels, and YouTuber. Good to see all you guys. Hey Debutante, good to see you. I am Two Bear. Aw, thanks Gypsy Doll. And Alicia says that we can see a billboard, or she can see a billboard right near her home, the one that was showed at the beginning. That is really neat. I always wonder where they all are, and I don't drive on the highways enough to know here if there's any down in Florida or not. So I've never been to the beginning of your lives. That's funny, Alicia. No, I'm glad. So glad you guys are here. I guess it's been, kind of frustrating on the streets lately. Hey, Show Poodles, good to see you. Fed Up Buttercup, hey, Lori, the Perfectly Imperfect Boy Mom, good to see you guys. I was in Momming It Up's live last night, and then I fell asleep. I'm terrible. But I love watching Momming It Up. She's really intuitive. I like what she has to say. I just kind of clocked out, and I never really got to watch the live that she was showing, so it was interesting to watch some of it. Hey Baba Rose, good to see you. Oh, okay. Alicia Hot Wheels says it's actually in the city, very strategically placed. Oh, neat. Okay, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, and that was who sent me the picture, was momming it up, that got the picture of the actual billboard that was up, the blip. Um, so hey, Cinderella. So yeah, so that was really awesome. It's good to see them up and out there. One of my favorite ones is, if you take this down, then you're, making me disappear twice, right? So it's very good to have the billboards up. I know they're controversial, but I think that, they definitely ask pointed and good questions as to what could have happened. Because in a scenario like we find ourselves in with the Sebastian Rogers case, I know it can be, you know, a little different than many of the other cases that we've probably followed, but there's only so many scenarios that there could be, right? I mean, there's only so many things that could have happened here. And I had a chance to watch the Deception Detective again, and he's going to make a part 2. So I'd rather review them together, because they tend to be, only about 15-minute long videos typically from Deception Detective. And so a lot to unpack just with what he was saying, in terms of just America's Most Wanted telling Sebastian's story. So of course he finds a lot of inconsistencies. He does statement analysis. So I like listening to what he says. Yeah, I love Deception Detective. He's really smart. Alicia Hotwell says yes, lots of traffic and a lot of criminal activity in that intersection. Oh wow. Okay, so that's good to know. Yeah, so the more people that see it, the more people are going to be wondering, the more people that could potentially cite Sebastian if he is out there in Tennessee, right? So I think it's smart to really make sure that Tennessee is very well aware. You know what I mean? I mean, it's good to bring awareness to everyone. We all need to know about it, right? And I think that's one good thing about the America's Most Wanted, is it brought Sebastian's story to a lot more people, and that's what's important. At the end of the day, even though I know a lot of us were quite frustrated with, some of the way that the story was told, especially because if you're following the case really closely, then you are going to end up seeing those differences, and just, if you will, a discrepancy in what's being said and that sort of thing. So I think it's important to point those things out, because the more, I mean, even like when Derek was asking about the windows being unlocked, that part was kind of like, well, we know that the windows weren't unlocked, because Katie said that all of them were locked and everything was secure. And I think Chris also said that as well, that all of the doors and windows were all secure, nothing was tampered with, right? Because I think that's what I was thinking about mostly yesterday, was the commentary and kind of the America's Most Wanted, even though it was a small clip. But I was thinking back on, kind of the details that the panel was given, or maybe some of the details that weren't given, and that I think was one of them, because, many times we have gone over the house, right? Even on as early as Smiley Stories World, when she did her podcast with Chris and Katie, they talked about that. They talked about how all of the doors were secure. They talked about how all the windows were secure. And again, I don't know of any windows that lock from the outside. Every single window, that we have, right, is going to lock from the inside to make sure it's secure, right? And so we also heard about the doors, right? We talked about the doors. Chris also maintained that, Sebastian, the only door that he would have walked out of was the front door. That's the only one he could have walked out of. The one that makes most sense. Hey, Mally Cat, good to see you, and welcome in, everyone. Megan L says, I love the fact that millions of people now know he's missing, even if they didn't have all the information. I agree with that. I think it's more important to get his face out there, right? Because a lot of times, and unless we follow true crime, or maybe we might be really interested, and then you do a deep dive and you really get to know about Sebastian, you might only have the viewer for a couple of minutes, but at least if they see his face, if they hear his name and know that he's missing from Tennessee, they have a little bit of information that they didn't have before. So I definitely think it's a positive, Meg, too. So thank you. And Lori says, there was a neighbor that said there was a window left open almost all night. Okay, Lori, I do remember hearing that. I do remember one of the neighbors saying that the window was open. I find it to be, well, I can't say absolutely. Some people like to have the windows open when it's cool out. Maybe they might have it cracked open. Do you remember which window she stated was open? Like which window in the house? Was it like a kitchen window, like over the sink, or, because I remember that, but I don't remember all the details, and I don't remember which neighbor it was. Oh, hey, Mally Cat. Michelle says, have they checked in empty buildings around the area? Well, they searched the 5-mile radius, right? And then they researched the 5-mile radius again. And then they went out of the 5 miles just a little bit. And I can't remember if it was far east or west, a little bit further, east or west. But they were kind of expanding the search area just a little bit outside the radius. And then they decided to go into the investigation aspect of the case. And so they scaled the search back and they went in for the investigative side of it. And then, of course, they did another large scale search at the end of March, right? But then we also had the United Cajun Navy that came in to help. And there was also the landfill search too. So there's been several searches, outside of the search radius a little bit, but definitely that 5-mile radius, they searched it and searched it and searched it. So I would think they would search the abandoned buildings, because a lot of times I would look at the news clips and see them talking about, looking under, looking in your sheds, looking under the cars, looking, all of these different places. And so, I think they did a really thorough search of all the buildings, just because, Sebastian liked small spaces, and people were thinking that maybe he kind of went into a building, like you said, to kind of get out of the cold, right? Because it was cold at night, and then they got rain. So it was, not the best circumstances too. Hey, Napanoch Father, good to see you. And Alicia Hotwell says, Meg, I agree. At least if they piqued curiosity, maybe people will Google him and learn more. Exactly. And I think that was the whole idea too, and again, I want to kind of go back to what Derek Levasseur was saying. He said that if, the more people that are interested and the more viewership that the series gets, this 3-week event, then of course, Fox will probably consider doing more missing stories and people who are, who haven't been found yet. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Hey, Positivity Tea Time. Good to see you. Maybe they will search for his name. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would. I know I would. If I saw Sebastian's story, I would want to know more about it, right? I would definitely want to kind of research and search him and find out more. Because, he's just an adorable kid, and it's like, what happened to him? Where is he? What could have gone on, Lori says, that's how I felt. I felt the only good part was that it was getting out there. Yeah, I understand that too, Lori. I do, because that was like the silver lining for me too. I'm glad that it got out there, and I'm glad people, will be talking about his case, more than before, and more will be on the radar of other people, it will be on the radar of other people's minds and things like that. So I think it's really good. Thank you, Mally Cat, for gifting a membership. Thank you so much. If you get a membership from Mally Cat, make sure you say thank you. Welcome to the Dragon Tribe. I'm so glad to be up here with you guys tonight. Let's see here. Oh, good. Positivity time. Got it. Oh, yay. Well, welcome to the Dragon Tribe. And Fed Up Buttercup says, was it a dining room? You know, they did like a weird kind of situation in like a kitchen. It wasn't their kitchen. It was allegedly an Airbnb, is from what I've heard, or I mean, I'm guessing maybe a staged home. It definitely looks like a staged home, in my opinion. And Lori says, I want to say it was somewhere near the garage, but I don't know for sure. Okay. And Crystal says dining room, wasn't it? Okay, so dining room. And Alicia says, Michelle, I believe they did, because there's a video of Seth and a team of searchers in the abandoned buildings. Yeah, he was, and that was in Natchez State Park too, right? Because they did a search. Seth was doing his own searches as well, even though, at first he said that in the first couple of days he was kind of, driving around the area, hollering out his window because they had asked people not to, get involved in the search. It was kind of like they were asking people not to, then they were asking people to help. They were asking people to check their own properties, right? Because that would be, something that people could feel proactively they could do. And, some properties are larger than other ones. So, he could have been hiding someplace, in the very beginning. That's kind of what we were thinking, that maybe he was hiding, maybe he took off, So Fed Up Buttercup says window. So it was the dining room window. And let's see, their dining room would have been that window that's right next to their front door. I think there's another window on the other side. I have to go way back in my pictures to find it. But okay, so if that one was open, I mean, Sebastian's was 5'5", then. And so I think he would absolutely be able to kind of get out one of those windows in the front, because it's so close to the, ground. It's not like there'd be a far jump or anything like that. Oh, see, that one's too close. Just bear with me, guys. Sorry, there we go. So there's two on the other side of the door. And then Sebastian's would be like the single room right there. But according to Chris and Katie, they were saying that all of the doors were locked, and all of the windows were locked. But then if a neighbor came out and said that the window was unlocked, or they saw it open, yeah, and it never hurts to ask, Michelle, exactly. Let's face it, in my opinion, we've been dealing with a lot of misinformation and different stories and different lies. We'll hear one side of the story, and then they'll go off and tell another side of the story to someone else, or they'll change certain details. So it's really been hard to kind of get a clear picture of what we're looking at here. And I think that is, the name of the game, in my opinion. I think that they're definitely trying to confuse and muddy the waters as much as possible, because, and it's unfortunate. It is very unfortunate, but it is definitely happening, in my opinion. And Lady for Justice says, good evening to everyone. Good evening, Lady for Justice. Thanks for being here. Hey, Carla. Glad to see you. And Crochet, nice to see you. I know. I fell asleep last night. Don't feel bad. I did too. I did too. It was a lot. Well, I was working on a lot of videos and stuff like that, and then I was pushing content out, and so I was like exhausted yesterday, and I thought, okay, I'll take a day off just to, kind of get some extra sleep and that sort of thing. And of course, I kind of wanted to watch what other people were saying about the interviews, and I like to do that. I like to look at different perspectives and see what the general consensus is, see if anybody has a little nugget that, I didn't catch or we didn't catch over here. Something fun to talk about. So Michelle says, I heard a case parents of missing child was scorched by social media, and when looked in abandoned building, the child was in the chimney the whole time and parents were innocent the whole time. Yeah, I do remember that, Michelle. I do remember that case. And I don't think it's fair to scorch anybody. I really don't. And I get what you're saying. I don't think it's nice to do that. No, I think that it's okay to point out the differences. It's okay to point out bad behavior. But no, I don't think that they should be scorched or anything like that. I think we need to re-examine a lot of the facts. It's just very difficult because there's not a lot that has come out from law enforcement. As a matter of fact, the last press conference that they did was on April 2nd, 2024, right? So all the way back, it's been a year, over a little over a year since they've come out and spoke publicly. They did speak to Dateline. Eric Craddock did email Dateline back, to my knowledge, and he said that he's working on the case, that they're working down the leads, and that they're going to be searching for justice and answers in Sebastian's case. And that's kind of the last thing that we've heard so far to date. But no kind of really no details excuse me, no details as to really more information on what could have happened that night. It seems like they don't have more information to give us, or nothing that they're willing to share with us at this juncture, which is frustrating because then we are relying on kind of, our thoughts, our speculations and things like that more so. And Alicia Hotwell says, I believe they searched a lot, but I worry because look at little Elijah Vu. They literally searched where he was more than once and someone stumbled upon him. Yeah, that happens a lot too, Alicia Hot Wheels. And, I can't discredit that. I think that honestly, we might start looking in places that are familiar to Chris and Katie, in my opinion, right? Just places that are familiar to them. Nature wise, was there places that maybe they went to fish or places like that they were, able to have access to outdoors? There's a lot, there are several possibilities, especially when we think about, the real estate aspect of this case and having those properties to, possibly take Sebastian to, in my opinion, allegedly, right? It's just one of those things that could be a possibility and it could be nothing. Megan L says, what was everyone's first true crime case that you followed? Oh, that's a good question. That's a really great question, Meg. I'm trying to think of who mine was. I know, of course, we all remember OJ. And I remember my science teacher wheeling the TV in and saying, we're going to watch OJ. And we were all like, oh, good. Like everybody knew about it. But I used to always watch Unsolved Mysteries when I was little. And so Jeffrey Dahmer was a close one. I remember that guy. He was scary. Gacy. I'm from Chicago, so Gacy was another one. Napanoch Father says, I don't remember what channel or what video it was that got me into the case, but I must say it only takes about 3 to 5 minutes of getting into the case, and you want to hope he has been found. Yeah, exactly. I agree, Napanoch Father. And also seeing Seth, like, pleading for whoever has Sebastian to, bring him home. I mean, it's heartbreaking. Oh, Carla, I'm sorry. My cousin's missing daughter found unalived a year later. Oh my goodness. Did they ever get justice for her, Carla? Napanoch Father says, I said before and I'll say it again, it's the damn green tea video that just breaks your heart. Oh, I know. Yeah, the green tea video. You really get to see Sebastian's personality shining through that. I think that's what gets me too. Just such a sweet kid. And Debutante says, I'm here listening tonight. I won't chat much. I'm doing some editing while listening. Okay, yeah, Debutante, I'm glad you're here. I remember that too. Very sad, Michelle, Alicia said. Gypsy doll, that's weird. They are awkward. I know. Lori says, I could not believe they brought the toy crane there with them. Yeah, that was so strange. There was like several toys that they had. Somebody mentioned a box. I'm gonna play this clip again, guys. And sorry, I didn't take my intro out of it, so it's just the Lady Freedom, intro that I use, like, with ODB. But so forgive me for that. But it's but I want to watch this again really quick because I want to look for this box that was in the background that somebody picked up and noticed. And I guess this is maybe a box that could have allegedly brought over those toys. So I want us to look at it really quick. So here we go.
Oh, baby, I like it raw. Wu-Tang Killer, the one killer bee, and he ain't for the kill now. Yeah, baby, I like it raw. Chop that down, pass it all around. Shimmy, shimmy, y'all, shimmy, yeah, shimmy, yeah. Give me the mic so I can take it away.
This is when it gets serious. This is raw.
Yeah, baby, I like it raw. I get biggie, diggy, raw.
Bring missing loved ones home. Every person you'll see on this screen tonight has someone waiting for them. A parent, a child, a friend, a community that refuses to give up, and neither will we. We've assembled a team of experts who dedicated their lives to solving cases and helping others. Derek Levasseur, you may know him from Big Brother, but he also has worked undercover with the FBI, DEA, and Secret Service. Elizabeth Smart, a survivor and advocate, whose abduction recovery was made possible through America's Most Wanted. Payne Lindsay, whose investigative true crime podcast, Up and Vanished, has brought cold cases back into the national spotlight. And tonight's special guest, Callahan Walsh, a familiar face to America's Most Wanted. Callahan does incredible work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Thank you so very much, everyone, for joining us. Let's get to our first case now. A missing child, Sebastian Rogers. On February 25th, 2024, Sebastian's mother said goodnight to her 15-year-old son. The next morning, Sebastian was gone.
I think we're seeing you out. Yeah, right now, really blonde hair, back to my guy's butt. My hair tied down. I was going to be wearing a black sweatshirt, black sweatpants. You know, there's that I'm behind it.
Sebastian is tall and skinny, has a contagious smile, loves video games, loves cats.
Boundless amounts of energy. Sebastian reminds me of a deer prancing through the woods, enjoying the smell, the breeze, new things. That's my son.
February 25th, the day before Sebastian went missing, Chris was in Memphis at work. So Sebastian and I went to Texas Roadhouse. After dinner, right around 9 o'clock, I laid down. I heard a noise in his room. I said, I don't care what you're doing, but you gotta knock it off and you gotta go to bed. And he answered, yes ma'am. I said, okay. And that was the last time that I spoke with Sebastian. The next morning, when I went in his room, he wasn't in his bed. After a minute or two, when I couldn't find him, I called Chris, and I said I can't find Sebastian. He's not in the house.
I got off of work and I had a text message from Sebastian's stepfather.
I said, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but Sebastian's missing.
I headed straight over to their house.
I started driving through the neighborhood. I was panicking. I was looking everywhere, like, where is he? What happened? Did he go with someone? Did someone take him? By the time I pulled into the school, Christopher was already telling me to turn around because the authorities were on their way.
They used helicopters, they used drones, they used ATVs, horseback.
An extensive search didn't yield one significant lead or even a glimpse of the boy on any doorbell cam video. Days later, investigators called to a landfill, still saying they had found nothing.
We have nothing. We just have speculations. We get criticized, the father gets criticized, law enforcement's been criticized.
Online sleuths are really analyzing videos and creating their own theories.
Sebastian is putting something in his pocket.
Surveillance footage from a neighbor shows two people outside of Sebastian's house that night. Something happened.
Tonight marks 1 year since Sebastian Rogers disappeared near Beach High School in Sumner County.
My life is not the same without my son. He's not here, and he's somewhere. Someone has him.
This year has been the worst nightmare I could have imagined to come alive.
Just want whoever has him, just give him back. It's my son.
Wow, my dad. You can feel it.
Okay, so I think I missed the box there in the background. Did you guys catch the box? Oh, yeah, layout of the house was on Zillow. Yeah, that's true. This was the first true crime, an unspeakable crime, the killing of Jessica Chambers. Ooh, that was a good one, Meg. That was a good one. Alicia says, Carla, are you referring to the chimney case? Didn't they say he climbed in there himself or something weird? Yeah, he did. He had autism and he climbed into the chimney. Hey, Jules, how you doing? Good to see you. Thank you for the green hearts. Aw, thank you. Hey, Napanat. Napanat says, many keep saying the first few days it's not what you think prior to the main peeps speaking. Yeah, well, and, you know, no one came out and spoke until, you know, day 8. You know, and of course, every time I watch this, I come up with something different. Jules says, oh, wow, thank you for the wrench. I'm honored. Oh, of course, Jules, thank you. Thank you so much. Absolutely. You look good in blue. And Carla says, my dad was a true crime junkie. He always brought the old magazines in the 80s with true crime, and I used to sneak and read them. Carla, that's great. I know. I'd get in trouble because I wouldn't be able to sleep at night because I'd be like watching Unsolved Mysteries. My parents were like, you can't be staying up watching that. That's funny. Oh, hey, Perfectly Imperfect Boy Mom. Good to see you too. She says, not sure if my comments for posting the chat was not displaying me at first. Oh, no, really? That's weird. I can see you now. Hey, Voices Carry. Voices Carry says no scent of him going out a window, though. That's a very true. Yeah, that's a great point there. Thank you. Absolutely. No scent of him going out the window. No. And Michelle says, I love true crime, but at the end of the day, it's not legal documents. I really don't take it as law. It's good rule of thumb for me. Yeah, I agree. You know, and especially on YouTube, it's purely speculation, you know, but we see that, you know, people feel more comfortable coming online and talking than they do, you know, to bigger news outlets. And I think they're more comfortable online. You know what I mean? So, oh yeah, crochet, Mom and Upstream was really good, and I accidentally fell asleep, last night, but really, really good stream. She was going over, excuse me, many aspects of the case, but mainly kind of going back over some of the statements that Chris had made about, this possibly being a hoax and different things like that. Um, it's unfortunate. But yeah, she has really good commentary. Um, okay, Carla says, look up Kelsey Schilling from Colorado, my classmate's daughter, crazy case, so sad. I will, Carla. Kelsey Schilling in Colorado. Yeah, it's just, we live in such a crazy world, crazy times. Yeah, I can't remember anything past that, K9 Jules. I'm not sure if there was, because that was the last one I remember. I mean, they did put a statement out when they put the new, or when they put the reward out in the newest flyer, right? But of course, they changed the flyer. Um, I think I still have it in here somehow. I saw it the other day, but oh, here we go. They changed it, right? Last seen on February 25th, 2024, right? Because for a while there, it was saying February 26th, 2024, and even the copy that I have behind me says that. Um, you know, and it's like, even in the interview we just watched, Katie says that was the last time she spoke to Sebastian, you know. And I don't know. I noticed too that the news clip that they pulled in stated that Sebastian went missing near Beach High School, but that's not true. He didn't go missing near Beach High School. He went missing from his home, right? Because Katie put him to bed, and that was the last time she saw him. So, in my opinion, it wouldn't be in the area of Stafford Court. It would be, from his bedroom, on Stafford Court. The accuracy has always kind of, bothered me. Ted Bundy was another one, Cinderella. Oh gosh. Voices Carrie says, and if something bad happened, I don't see them driving him very far, if not alive, in my opinion. Well, and it would have to work into an alibi, right? So if we're going to believe that there was foul play involved, there would have to be a certain time frame that it would all be able to fit in logically, and kind of beyond a reasonable doubt that that's what happened. So I agree. I don't see them, him being far away. But then again, he could be anywhere on the way to Memphis or, Mississippi. Oh, okay. Nicole Jean Horde was my cousin's daughter, went missing and found deceased in Salina, Kansas. Oh my gosh, Carla, I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness. Was she was taken? Oh man. Well, that's another thing, Katie did say, did someone take him? That was one thing she said in this interview. That she was thinking to herself when she couldn't find Sebastian that morning, the morning of February 26th, 2024, that she was wondering to herself if someone took him. Did someone take him? But she never said that before. The first initial interview she gave, she said that I don't know why he walked out the door, making us all believe that Sebastian walked out the front door. And again, that was what Chris was even saying all the way up until on Web Sleuths. He was saying that Sebastian walked out the front door. And then again, on the year anniversary, when they were interviewed by Fox News, again, they told Fox News that they believed that Sebastian walked off. And Lori says, I would say the places that have to do with whoever's car that was that came up to. Yeah, I think so too, Lori. I believe in the car, Cuckoo Cuckoo, yeah. Bundy and Adam Walsh. Yeah, Adam Walsh was another one that I could remember way back then. Yes. You know, hey Brenda, good to see you. Susan Smith, maybe, Brenda says. Okay, Susan Smith does remind me a lot of Katie's demeanor. That is one person that I can kind of take a comparison off of when I think about Katie's demeanor and Susan Smith's demeanor. They're very similar, in my opinion. And Gypsy Doll says Mark Redwine. Mark Redwine's case was also another case that I know a little bit about. So yeah, Gypsy Doll. And Michelle says, but if cases we remember, we had BTK here as a child and later as an adult. Yeah, and he was a pillar of the community. Like nobody saw that coming. And he was a very, very sick and deranged individual, or still is. Cuckoo says yes, Susan Smith. And Alicia Hotwell says Kyron Horman. He is local to me, and I follow and still look even after 14 years. Oh, thank you, Alicia Hotwells. And Kyron Horman is another case that I'm very familiar with too. His mother, she's always trying to spread awareness, and she also thinks that there was foul play suspected with with Kyron's stepmother. So yeah, and Deception Detective also compared Kyron's mother to Sebastian's father, right? Wearing the shirt. Every time she gets a chance to be in front of the camera, she's wearing a shirt with Kyron's, name and picture on it, and she's trying to advocate for her son to come home. So yeah, absolutely, Alicia Hot Wheels. Yeah, he said his son took off, Gypsy Doll says. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. No justice for your cousin Nicole. I'm so sorry, Carla. My gosh. I just don't like hearing that, I'm so sorry. And Meg says, at K9, oh boy, I lived up there for 7 years and still wonder about some unsolved cases. Yeah, well, there's so many in Tennessee. I mean, Cuckoo Cuckoo says Kyron Horman still has my heart. Yeah. I mean, that was such a bizarre case, just such a bizarre case. Stepmom said she dropped him off, and at the school there was a science fair that day, and she said she dropped him off and never saw him again. But then the school says different, and her GPS says different. And Lori says my first case I got into was a friend that shot his ex, her boyfriend, or excuse me, her ex-boss and himself at the hair salon they worked at. The ex and boss worked at. Oh, wow. Wow, that's crazy, Lori. It's okay, Connie S. I'm glad you're here. And Sammy says, hey, Sammy, says hard to say because I've been following true crime since way before CSI ever became a thing. But there are those couple cases that stick out to me that still are unsolved that drive me the craziest. Yeah, I think, another one for me is always going to be Harmony Montgomery, And one of the main reasons I think is when I heard Adam in court, and he was basically taunting the Manchester police, and he's like, you're never gonna find her and you're wasting your time, and I would just love for her to be found. I just really would. Hey, Carrie Star. Carrie Star says they had the box on the counter behind them. Okay, behind them. I don't know how I missed it. I bet you I was writing something down. Thanks, Carrie. So yeah, it looks like they may have put everything into like a brown box and brought it. And a lot of people were, asking and kind of speculating as to why they didn't show, more footage of Sebastian's room at Seth's house. And I think it was because they were trying not to make the Proud Feet look absolutely terrible by, not showing that footage because, I mean, people would probably ask, well, what's going on here? Okay, Jules says, yeah, it was on the counter. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think people would be asking that, I would, even if I didn't know anything about the case, I'd be like, well, what about the bedroom he went missing from? That's weird. Um, and Debutante says, yes, there is a Funko box. I want to know what the character is. Oh, okay. Oh, Funko box. Gordon Ramsay. Jules. Debutante says, oh, never mind. I was thinking of the Funko box. I went down a whole rabbit hole looking to find it. Oh, no. Well, and I know like Naruto and stuff comes in the Funko characters, that you can get. Yeah, Lori says I was pretty young when that happened. Carla says we got storms going through. Hopefully didn't lose electricity. Oh, yeah, be careful, Carla. YouTuber says, has anyone heard that Sebastian liked or played basketball? Oh, no, I've never heard that before. No, I didn't. I'm sure there were things, like, I don't know if they still do it like this, but like, back in the day in PE, you'd have units, right? You would have like volleyball, and then you might play pickleball, and you might play badminton, So I'm sure there were a lot of different sports that he enjoyed. I think KP checked out years ago, 15-year-olds don't play with toys, and everything she does and says, etc., has many years younger. Yeah, I can see what you're saying there, Lori. And I mean, let me see if I can't find this. Oh, hold on, sorry. Like, this is a marble run. And you kind of just set it up. Like I was showing you guys, it's a big thing. But this is what, Katie was saying on Queen Bee that Sebastian liked to do is marble run, right? And some of them are pretty sophisticated ones that you can do. Like this guy's got a Notre Dame marble run.
Big enough to fill an entire ping pong table. I spent 4 months building it out of Gravitrax pieces, adding architectural details, lights, and even some hidden marble mechanisms in the attic. Watch to the end to see this entire marble run synced to music, and I'm going to show you the difference between.
I mean, it's pretty cool. Like you can make a lot of different ones out of it, and I mean, even a little kid could play it.
Robinhood has new crypto coins available. Robinhood offers one of the lowest costs to trade.
It just kind of does that. Where like the marbles go through, gravity takes them. And they're set up on like a grid thing like that, right? Like all the pieces. And then you drop the marbles down and it goes down the tubes and, whatnot. And it's fun, but like you can build pretty sophisticated marble runs, right? Because I was looking into that too, because I was thinking that kind of sounds like for a little baby, or a little kid that would like that rather than an older kid. Yes, Alicia Hot Wheels, Callahan is the older brother. Oh, I see what you're asking. The younger or older brother to Adam. I think he would have to be the younger one, if I could get, if I could take a wild guess. I do too. I loved Seth's description of Sebastian. Yeah. Yeah. That was a new one for me, YouTuber. Yeah. Yeah, I agree, voices carry. Carrie Starr says, love how she has been studying behavior and statement analysis done on her, now says his name over and over. She did say it. She said his name, right, over and over. She really did, which is different, right, than what we're used to seeing, you know, like where she kind of has to force herself, you know. Well, that's a good point, YouTuber. Says voices carry, so I'd love to know why they threw why they threw a baseball mitt into the mix suddenly. It's weird, isn't it? And it's not like, you know, the neighbors said they were outside playing catch or anything like that. Michelle says a parent that is present in every aspect of his life knows 15-year-old stop showing younger pics with cute animals. It deflects from him as his real age and demeanor. Yeah, I'm glad they showed some of the older pictures as well. You know, I think it's important to show those. I think that way people can get a good, you know, mental picture of what Sebastian looks like in case they do see him, you know, out there. You know. Hey, Vic, good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jules. Thank you so much. I always forget. I'm just showing you guys whatever. I'm like, here's the marble run. And Michelle says she deflects his whole descriptions as much different than he is. Yeah, I do think she deflects as well. Michelle, yeah. Yeah, and you know, she said that he's tall, and now I'm 5'6", and Sebastian was 5'5" at the time of his disappearance, and I think that he would be taller at this point. You know, I can definitely see where she's coming from on that. Hey, Cece, all about them again. I agree. You know, and then Chris even, you know, says about how he's being harassed and how, you know, Seth is being harassed and all this different stuff. And it's like, you know, it was just a small window of time that they gave to tell Sebastian's story. And then Chris has to go in there, you know, whining about his own self. It's ridiculous, in my opinion. Because it's not about Chris, it's about Sebastian. He's missing, not Chris. Chris is right there. He can deal with what's going on. And Little Miss Sharon says, hello, everyone. And hi, Little Miss Sharon. Good to see you. And YouTuber says, poor Seth is on the edge, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, gosh, you know, he's beside himself like any normal parent would be, you know, in my opinion. You know, it's just, yeah, Jules, I know, guys. It's just, you know, and, you know, he's getting out there and he's doing it, wearing the shirt, you know, he did a really good job. Like even Harris Faulkner was like, hey, you know, we could feel that dad's pain, you know. So Cuckoo Cuckoo says, yes, I'm so sorry for Seth. My heart breaks for him. Hey, Astrology for Mystics with Jen. Good to see you. Even Harris Faulkner picked up on feeling Seth's pain. You can unlike when someone tells a story. Well, exactly. It's not like when the other side is speaking, you know. Chris's demeanor was very angry, in my opinion, and seemed very mad. His appearance is always changing, you know. I noticed that as well. But with Seth, it's always like what we see is what we get. You know, with Seth all the time, it's like it's always Seth. Like we know not to expect anything more or anything less, really. You know what I mean? He's always just himself, always trying to advocate for finding his son, always making that the most important thing. He was pleading with, you know, people to bring him back if they had him. I mean, all of that, you know. You didn't catch it, YouTuber? We could play it again if you guys, you know, we could watch it again. It was so fast, you know, like it feels like it went by so fast. And then of course, like I'll be writing something down because I'm like, oh, I missed something there. Okay, the box is right before they focus in the picture of Sebastian. Okay, thank you, Carrie Star. I'll look for that too, right before they focus. Hey, Trishy, good to see you. Okay, so let's watch it again really quick, right? Let's just take a look. Let's take a gander at it again. Because I must have had my eyes someplace. My eyes were someplace else. All right, here we go.
Ooh, baby, I like it raw. Wu-Tang killer, the one killer bee, and he ain't for the kill now. Yeah, baby, I like it raw. Chop that down, pass it all around. Shimmy, shimmy, y'all, shimmy, yeah, shimmy, yeah. Give me the mic so I can take it away.
This is when it gets serious. This is wrong.
Yeah, baby, I like it raw. I get Biggie Diggy raw.
Bring missing loved ones home. Every person you'll see on this screen tonight has someone waiting for them. A parent, a child, a friend, a community that refuses to give up, and neither will we. We've assembled a team of experts who dedicated their lives to solving cases and helping others. Derek Levasseur, you may know him from Big Brother, but he also has worked undercover with the FBI, DEA, and Secret Service. Elizabeth Smart, a survivor and advocate, whose abduction recovery was made possible through America's Most Wanted. Payne Lindsay, whose investigative true crime podcast, Up and Vanish, has brought cold cases back into the national spotlight. And tonight's special guest, Callahan Walsh, a familiar face to America's Most Wanted. Callahan does incredible work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Thank you so very much, everyone, for joining us. Let's get to our first case now. A missing child, Sebastian Rogers. On February 25th, 2024, Sebastian's mother said goodnight to her 15-year-old son. The next morning, Sebastian was gone.
I think there's a juvenile video right now. Really blonde hair, back to my guy's foot. I'm gonna turn down. I was going to be wearing a black sweatshirt, black sweatpants. You know, there's a permanent consciousness. Just walking around.
Sebastian is tall and skinny, has a contagious smile, loves video games, loves cats.
Boundless amounts of energy. Sebastian reminds me of a deer prancing through the woods, you know, enjoying the smell, the breeze, new things. That's my son.
February 25th, the day before Sebastian went missing, Chris was in Memphis at work. So Sebastian and I went to Texas Roadhouse. After dinner, right around 9 o'clock, I laid down. I heard a noise in his room. He said, I don't care what you're doing, but you gotta knock it off and you gotta go to bed. And he answered, yes ma'am. I said, okay. And that was the last time that I spoke with Sebastian. The next morning, when I went in his room, he wasn't in his bed. After a minute or two, when I couldn't find him, I called Chris and I said I can't find Sebastian. He's not in the house.
I got off work and I had a text message from Sebastian's stepfather.
I said, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but Sebastian's missing.
I headed straight over to their house.
I started driving through the neighborhood. I was panicking. I was looking everywhere, like, where is he? What happened? Did he go with someone? Did someone take him? By the time I pulled into the school, Christopher was already telling me to turn around because the authorities were on their way.
They used helicopters, they used drones, they used ATVs, horseback.
An extensive search didn't yield one significant lead or even a glimpse of the boy on any doorbell cam video. Days later, investigators called through a landfill, still saying they had found nothing.
We have nothing. We just have speculations. We get criticized, the father gets criticized, law enforcement's been criticized.
Online sleuths are really analyzing videos and creating their own theories.
Sebastian is putting something in his pocket.
Surveillance footage from a neighbor shows two people outside of Sebastian's house that night. Something happened.
Tonight marks 1 year since Sebastian Rogers disappeared near Beach High School in Sumner County.
My life is not the same without my son. He's not here. And he's somewhere. Someone has him.
This year has been the worst nightmare I could have imagined come alive.
Just wants whoever has him. Just give him back. It's my son.
Wow, my dad. You can feel it.
Okay, so I did see at that time, right? Well, and Brenda, I agree. They didn't say anything about him walking out the door this time. But Katie did say, did he go with someone? And then she suggested maybe, that did someone take him? So, and YouTuber says, in my opinion, Katie added, he might have been taken because she and Edgar now realize they have doubled down on explanations of the flashlight video. Right, because, obviously America's Most Wanted was intrigued by the flashlight video, right? Because it is a piece of evidence. It is in Sebastian's case file. I still think it's so weird that they didn't show the whole thing, with the other light source going back, because I think that's a piece that, again, people need to know. People need to know that Sebastian went missing from his house, and they need to know that there was a light source that went back to the house. That is such an important piece of the puzzle, in my opinion. And Carla says, my parents watched about Adam because he was not so far from where we lived. Wow. Yeah, I remember watching about Adam too. There was even a movie about his story. And Brenda Calvert says they must have realized no one was buying the story of him running away. Well, that's a great point too, because why would they change it up? I agree with that. Definitely, Brenda. That's a great point. Yeah, Maddie McCain's case. Yes. Yes, SBC Foundation. Hey, Mama Bear. Mama Bear says, where the fuck is that poor kid? I know, Mama Bear. It's so frustrating, Oh, thank you, Carla, for hitting the like. And Alicia says, I believe when they said that door, I think she meant his bedroom door, and Sebastian caught CP in the house, got upset, and all hell broke loose. And that's a strong possibility, YouTuber says, I'm still fascinated by JonBenet Ramsey's case and Madeleine McCann's case too. Yeah, I agree. Both, unsolved, both, we just don't understand what could have happened there. Cheyenne says he did not climb out of a window or the dogs would have picked up his scent. Yeah, that's a great point, Cheyenne. Someone else said that earlier too, and I apologize for forgetting who it was. But yeah, absolutely. There would have been some sort of scent, right? Yeah, I agree. Yeah, see, K9 Jules says, yep, Madeleine McCann has been baffling me for sure. Yep. Oh, yes, I know what you meant, Cheyenne, yes. Napa Nat says, growing up in San Francisco Bay Area, we all knew about the Zodiac Killer. Oh, that's another one that was really, really scary. Absolutely. And Carrie Starr says another thing I picked up on was she said that when she yelled after the noise, that was the last time she spoke to him. But these long pauses, and you can see her mind thinking of what really happened. I agree there. And I think it's really important to kind of recognize that and the way that it's being said. Absolutely. Because I noticed that too. I thought it was very odd that she would say, that was the last time I spoke with him, because that really wasn't speaking with him. That was just kind of telling him, get to bed, knock it off and go to bed, right? Another interesting piece was when Chris tells Seth that Sebastian is missing, because, at that point, at 7:00 in the morning, we're only, an hour into Sebastian being missing, and already Chris is, labeling it as Sebastian went missing. It's very odd that his brain would go there first off, Brenda says, I wish the mom of Ashley Martinez, missing 14-year-old from St. Joseph, Missouri, would be solved. She disappeared from a local pool. Oh, wow, Brenda, I've never heard of that story. Ashley Martinez, missing 14-year-old from St. Joseph, Missouri. She disappeared from a local pool. Aw, well, thank you for spreading awareness about her, Brenda. And YouTuber says, I now think she passed in that apartment and the parents have been doing damage control ever since. Yeah, that's a good point, YouTuber. I think that could be a strong possibility. Brenda says, wish mom would get justice, I meant to say. Oh, thank you, Brenda. Always pampering those stinky feet. Vic, I agree. And I think that's why they didn't show Sebastian's room, at the other house. I think, it wouldn't have made them look good. Carrie Stars says, I think they have his stuff boxed up. That's why they didn't have them at their house. I think so too. I do too, Carrie Star. And we also heard that, Katie was getting rid of some of Sebastian's items as well. Allegedly, I heard that, and SCP Foundation says, we had one in Texas, Ricky Lee Green. He unalived women he picked up in bars, and bad thing, I had seen him in a bar and I went to myself, scary stuff, and he was married and had a kid. Oh, wow. He took them to his home. Oh my goodness. Wow. Ricky Lee Green. Okay, I've not heard of him. Wow. Oh, that's cool, Jules. Jules says, Lady Freedom, Gordon Ramsay just filmed a TV show about 20 minutes south of me. That's cool. I know that the last, what was it? Hell's Kitchen was for the spot in Connecticut at the casino. But I haven't watched, I didn't see who won that because I was watching it before I moved and then I just didn't get to watch it again, but I love Ramsey. He's something else, isn't he? Carla says, my heart has always broke for the parents of these missing kids. I don't know how they pull themselves out of bed every day. Amen, Carla. As hard as it is for us all to watch all of this unfold, it's got to be 10 times worse for the parents involved. I agree. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Because it's just got to be tough, and there's not even really words that I can say. Alicia says, Cheyenne, exactly. Remember, CP said if he would have gone out of his bedroom window, we would have heard him and he would have gotten stickers in his feet. Yeah, exactly, Alicia. Yeah, he says, that there was, because Nancy Grace asked, what was underneath the window, and it was like a little bush with mulch, and they told Nancy Grace that there was mulch, but mulch isn't like super, tough to. Oh, hey, Salty Gigi, good to see you. I was disappointed that they didn't show that much of Seth to Lil Miss Sharon, because he was really the one who was heartfelt and genuine, and I think that is really what people need to see, to get them to care. Because the proud foot, I saw that too, the baseball mitt on the table. And, it's just so manufactured and fake, right? Because we've never heard that Sebastian liked to play baseball ever, or even catch in the yard, because if you have a mitt, you'd play out in front or something, or in backyard. They had a good sized backyard. Polly Klaus, oh yeah, Polly Klaus, yeah. Napa Nat lived in the area. Father spotted on his reaction. Yeah, I remember Polly Klaus's case too. Barbara Rose says Edgar and KK life is one big lie. It really is. Barbara Rose, I agree with that. I don't see how anybody could see them as being truthful or taking them seriously at this point, with how many different stories. It's not hard to figure out, especially if you watch. And I know there's a lot to watch and there's a lot of different things that might not be fun to watch, but you have to. And Carrie Star says she put all of the younger pics, all of the good times she talks about are when he was younger, nothing from the present time. So sad for Sebastian. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, and I've said before, I believe that, when Katie and Chris first got together, there was a lot of love bombing involved, taking Sebastian places that he liked, taking Katie to places that she liked, and really, showing them a good time. And then, that kind of all stopped when he was moving in, the cats had to go, and then it just progressively got worse. I think that another catalyst would be, when they moved from California to Tennessee, and Alicia says, we have had personalized Funko characters made. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Chris and the Crane in there. Oh gosh. Oh no. I saw those personalized characters. Yeah. Oh gosh. Brenda says, yes, they concentrated on the Foot story. I think if you read between the lines, there was a reason for that. I think so too, Brenda. And I don't think they're going to fool many people. I'm praying anyways that they're not going to be able to, because it's very, it's all very weird. And especially if you're looking at this case for the first time, say that was the first time you watched it, was on America's Most Wanted. It's definitely something that I feel people are going to pick up on that, especially if they decide to, excuse me, deep dive into the case. They're going to pick up on that. And Cheyenne says, exactly, Hot Wheels. And 2 different times CP said they'll never find him, allegedly, even though I heard him. Yeah, exactly, Cheyenne. That's a great point. That is a great point. He did allegedly say that, and I heard that too. And Debutante says, Lady Freedom, I have a feeling it's a Funko CP would like, and not Sebastian. If I knew what one it is, I think it would definitely prove, in my opinion, that all those toys came from CP's mama's curio cabinet. Maybe, Debutante. Yeah, maybe. And I can see them doing that too, because and they push this Crane narrative, right? Sebastian loved cranes and he wanted to be just like Chris, and I think they do that deliberately to hurt Seth. There would be no other logical explanation for doing that, right? Oh, okay. Lainey says, my son loves those. It's a great toys for stimming. Oh, cool. Cool, Lainey. Thank you for that. Megan L says, Sebastian looked to me like a very polite, well-behaved teenager while at the Texas Roadhouse. It makes me sad to see that video. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. He was so polite, so, well-behaved, just everything, yeah, it was definitely not the picture that was painted by the other side, and Carrie says, I would say the Proudfoot's lawyer controlled what was allowed to be said and what was allowed to be shown too. That's very possible. I agree there. I think that, they were trying to keep it down to a minimum, and we know that the Proud Feet have controlled the situation from the beginning, in my opinion. Even when it comes to law enforcement, because there was unconscious bias in the beginning. Any one of us would have been thrown in the squad car and would have been questioned as to where our children were at. We even see that in Summerwell's case. They grabbed Candace up and threw her in the cop car and made her go take a polygraph. We did not see that in this case. Yeah. Oh, Vic, that's true. Reminds me of Mousetrap. Yeah, exactly. That is so true. Good call. And yeah, because you'd throw the marble in there and the marble would go down, and it'd have a track that it would go on. I know. Brenda says, me too, Megan Els. I want to keep him safe. Carla says, we had a man that unalived a man that unalived his wife that lived in the basement of a hospital I worked at. He lived down there for 3 months. Oh my goodness. Wow. Holy cow. I had to go in the basement alone on weekends. It was scary. I bet. Oh my Lord, Carla. And Debbie Chan says, yep, I think I think CP got to whine more than we got to hear Seth talk. Yeah, that's for sure, and I don't know why he feels the need to say that every time they interview with somebody. He always has to get that piece out there. We're being, we're being harassed. It's like, okay. And hey, Joy McMurray says, how will Seth feel if it turns out that his ex-wife had something to do with Sebastian's disappearance? I can't really speculate onto how Seth would think or feel, but I think that it would be, a logical reaction just based on, how Seth's demeanor has always been. I believe that he would probably want justice, and, he may even feel vindicated in some instances, because I think that there's a fair amount of, doubt about the story that Katie and Chris are giving, and I think rightfully so. Um, and Michelle says it didn't help when father and stepfather get into drama-induced F-bomb name calling over social media. It doesn't help find the child at all and benefits no one. Yeah, I agree with that, Michelle. And the reason why I wanted to show what was going on is because I think that Seth showed a lot of restraint all the way up into a certain point. But when, people and team members are being attacked and things like that, it's really hard to keep quiet for very long. I think it's always the best practice to ignore and report. I've told you guys that several times. It's just super important to do that because you have to stay in the right on these situations. You can't allow the other person to get underneath your skin and different things like that. But I can't say that I would have made a different decision. I probably would have had it by now, especially when Chris was going on there threatening everybody who works with Seth, and things like that. It's a terrible thing when we're being gaslit to believe that both sides are wrong, but yet we see Chris doing this over and over and over again. Right before Bullhorn Betty's court date, he got up with Yada on panel and yelled at her, and she's telling the other side, I'm going to give you information, blah, 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 and then we see Chris going on panel to panel to panel, not talking about Sebastian, not trying to find him, but talking about very unsavory things like sex toys and things like that. In my opinion, there's no room in the true crime community for something like that. When we have a creator that claimed to be about Sebastian and she's up there with the stepfather talking about this stuff and it's a big joke, that's not doing anything to help Sebastian. So I think Seth coming up and standing up for his son, and especially when his son was called the R word allegedly by Mr. Proudfoot, I think Seth had no choice but to get up and say something. So I have to respectfully disagree with your comment, but I do agree with the part that's, very obvious. It doesn't help Sebastian, right? But enough is enough when you have a stepfather doing that, and he's taunting, people, and we see people doing this in other true crime cases, right? Like the smiley face killer, he was doing the same thing, sending notes to the police, thinking it was funny. They get off on getting over on other people, and so I don't blame Seth one bit for having to get up there. And I personally, being a woman who has had a history of domestic violence, I really commend men that are willing to stand up to another man who is bullying a woman or a child, because that's exactly what those men do. They bully women and children because they're weak and they're cowards, and that's who they are. They would never go down to the bar and pick out a man the same size as them and talk the way that they do to a woman or their own mother or their own children or their stepchildren. So in my opinion, what Seth said, I was cheering him on. And you know, it's not something that needs to happen all the time. I think, you know, it's a one and done. I think we understand where Seth is coming from and he spoke his piece. But honestly, if good people stand by and do nothing, that's when evil is able to exist and persist and prevail. It's when we sit back and say, oh, well, we're not going to say anything to Chris because we're scared of him, or I don't want to be targeted by him, or hey, I'm not going to talk about Sebastian's case anymore because somebody might not like me talking about it. We have to stand up. You have to stand up to a bully. That's the only way they're going to leave you alone. You know? Mama Bear says Proverbs 29:20, seest thou a man that is hasty in his words? There is more hope of a fool than of him. There's no hope for the proudfoots and bower socks, in my opinion. Thank you, Mama Bear. Thank you so much. Yeah. Carla says, Mama Bear, amen. We have to focus on that, you know. Kelly says, so true, Mama Bear. First thing Katie said, Brenda says, is Chris was in Memphis. I noticed that, and a lot of people picked up on that too. Alicia says, look at his side eye, making sure she's telling the right story. Well, and do you remember when we played the audio that Justin had of the phone call between Heather Cohen and the Proud Feet? They were getting into it about that story and about the thud, you know, specifically. And Katie was saying, no, I didn't say it like this. I said it like that. And then he's like, go ahead and correct it. Go ahead and correct it. And it was a point of contention. And then again, we see the side eyeing Alicia Hot Wheels, very good catch. And it's just like that. Like, you better get the story right, you know? And I do believe that that's what was going on. You know, Michelle says, yes, I agree, putting face out there on America's Most Wanted, but the panel really needed to be the person working on the case like this. One, Miss Smart was a victim who is there for a reason. Online sleuth. Okay, no. Yeah, well, and I wondered how, you know, Elizabeth's commentary would be, because I thought of it like this, you know, she did go missing from her own home in her own bedroom, right? And her parents got a lot of flack for it because obviously, you know, like she said, people do think that your bedroom is the safest place. But if somebody comes in and takes you out of that bedroom, then it's no longer the safest place, right? And so a lot of speculation swirled around, you know, where her father was and different things, but come to find out he was not involved, and it was, you know, a couple that were very strange and unhinged individuals who took her and did horrible things to her, abused her and kept her, right, kidnapped her. And so, but in this instance, we don't see that same kind of thing. And also, I don't think that her parents moved out of the house that they know that their child left from or was taken from, right? They also did interviews in their home and made sure that the public knew the right story. We do not see that with the Proud Feet. They are always trying to distance Sebastian from their house. He was last seen on Stafford Court. That's not true. He was last seen, according to his mother, Katie, at 9 o'clock when he went to bed. The last conversation, or in her words, the last time that she spoke with Sebastian was around 10 p.m. when there was a thud in his bedroom. And she said, Sebastian, I don't know what you're doing in there, but knock it off and go to sleep, right? And we've heard different variations of that, but in Katie's words, that is what happened. You know, but they want to distance themselves. They want to distance themselves and confuse the situation, you know. Meg says, I agree, Michelle, it does not help to find Sebastian, but I also feel everyone has a breaking point, and for Seth, that was it. Mine would have been 14 months ago for certain. Yeah, I agree, Meg. And that's, you know, I feel that way too. I feel like it would have had a problem a long time ago. And, if we think back about it, if we think back to the very beginning, so the first time that we hear about Sebastian's dad, Seth, his biological father, his actual father, was on Duchess for the Missing, 8 days after Sebastian went missing. And Katie does this fake crying bit where she says, if he wants to talk to his dad, he just asks us and we'll let him. And she did it just like that. Okay. We couldn't see her, right? Because they don't show their faces. And that's another thing that I find to be absolutely different, right? Night and day. Seth shows himself. He gets up there. You can see my body language when I'm sitting here talking to you. We can see Seth's body language when he's sitting here talking to us, right? We don't see that with Chris and Katie. They hide themselves. They hide behind an avatar that says C on it. They hide behind a picture of, Chris with his daughter when she was a newborn, right? On his chest. That's another avatar that I've seen. But usually it's a green C, and that's all we get. But with Seth, he's not afraid to show himself, right? But in the beginning, we were led to believe that there was a great relationship between the parents. And the next day after Duchess for the Missing, Katie and Chris talk to Holly Thompson, and they tell Holly Thompson that, again, Sebastian is very welcome to go back and forth to his dad's house. He never has to just leave the house, right? Because many of us, I myself included, thought in the beginning, well, did he get upset? He is a teenager, right? Did he get upset and say, I'm walking to my dad's? You know what I mean? Something happened. Perhaps, he went to his dad's, right? I mean, that's reasonable, normal, nothing too off. Although it is dangerous and it's in the middle of the night, and, it might have gotten him into deep trouble, right? Like maybe somebody was driving by and grabbed him up and he wasn't anticipating that to happen. I mean, there are different scenarios, but we're also told by Chris that he and Seth speak regularly, almost daily, which, turns out to be not true, right? Because from the beginning, in my opinion, Chris and Katie wanted Seth to be on board with their narrative and what they were going to put out to the public. And like any good father, any good parent would, Seth decided to tell the truth, to allow us to know certain details, like there was CPS involvement, there was a counselor involved, there was school talk of sending Sebastian to different schools. There was talk of Sebastian going and living with Seth, and that was actually set up and set in stone by the time Sebastian was missing. So, good question, little Miss Sharon. What happened to the puppies? That's a good question. Cece says, I'm glad Seth pointed out that he got a text message from CP, not an actual phone call. Yeah, he got a text, right? And it said 911, but they didn't let Seth finish his story. They cut Seth off, and then they went and said what Chris, they went to Chris for his story, which I didn't really like that either, So, yep, spotted the box, debutante spotted the box. Oh. Flaps open on the box too. Yeah, debutante, good eye. Yeah, for sure. You're welcome. Oh, you're welcome, YouTuber. Sorry, it's got my intro in there. I should have just broke it down a little bit more too. And we will, like I said, I want to make sure that we can get all of Deception Detective's perspective on the panel, because I have a feeling that he's going to kind of knock our socks off a little bit. And I agree that it probably would warrant a part 2, especially because there's many things that the panelists just don't understand, right? That we do, because we've been following the case. Mama Bear says, was she already thinking that within minutes of driving around? You know, and that's the first time we've heard her say it, you know? Um, yeah, Perfectly Imperfect Boy Mom. I see that. I agree with that too. It seems like they cut off a lot of the story to make his segments shorter. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry guys. I'm so behind in chat. Hey Suzanne, good to see you. And Michelle says CP and KP are seeming to act as if going on with their life by writing themselves off home, and Sebastian stuff just seems a bit soon unless you already know the outcome. I agree, Michelle. I agree. Hey, Lil Redo. Good to see you. Let's see here. And it is so frustrating. I mean, you know, it's all these little things that we point out, you know. Um Canine Captain Jules says, I want a Nancy Grace Funko Pop. That would be fun. That would be fun. I'd like to have one too. I actually found one that was like it was Pennywise the clown, and I was like, I don't know if I want that sitting in here though, because it was scary, even though it was a Funko one, or you know, there were a couple different ones, but they were pretty scary, you know. Oh, Sammy says Paula Sims on my road said 6-week-old daughter was kidnapped by a masked intruder. 3 years later, her 13th found in the woods. The other in the freezer. Oh my goodness. Her son, 27-year-old husband, died in a wreck 1 year before she got out. Oh my goodness, Sammy. Oh my goodness. Gypsy Doll says CP blocked me on Facebook a long time ago. I put a mad face when he had the nerve to post something about autism. Well, you know, he has posted a lot of weird stuff on that Facebook page. You know, he really has. He really has. Um, and I would probably make mad faces at him too, you know. Um, I am Two Bear says, is anyone really afraid of CP? You know, I think he has his cronies that do a lot of his dirty work for him, you know, so I don't know if he should be feared or just like, you know, the people that he might pay to do his dirty work for him, you know, because it's been alleged that, you know, his family does pay for those services. Hey, Annette, good to see you. Annette says, here from Western Australia. Oh my goodness. Oh, in the hospital, surgery went okay, and just a bit of pain, but I'm okay. Well, I'm glad to hear your surgery went well, and that I know the recovery can be tough. Oh, I'm glad that it's over with. We'll be praying for you for a speedy recovery. Um, and YouTuber says, I am Two Bear. I was afraid of his mullet. Anything could have been hiding in there. Oh no. That's funny. That is funny. He got rid of it though. No more mullet. His mullet card was revoked. Um all right. Kyron Horman is another case that could have been solved. I agree with that, Lil Redo. I think that it could have been solved, and I think, you know, I just pray for his mom all the time, hoping that, you know, they do something soon, because I know she thinks she knows what happened, and I agree with her, you know. Hey Robin 407, good to see you. Lord, I meant could have been solved, not solving it. Right. No, I know what you meant. I know what you meant, Loretto. Um Carla says, Loretto, yes, that stepmom should be in prison for a red rum, and she did get for trying to unalive her husband. Yeah, yeah. You know, I mean, and if she's willing to do that, I mean, it's like, I am Two Bear says they didn't ask Seth if he was there or if Seth had seen him. That should have been first. Yeah, that's a good point. I am Two Bear. I think so. I think they should have asked a little bit more questions and let Seth tell his side of the story the way he experienced it, right? You know, because that's important. And Megan L says CP and KP led everyone to believe that there was a great co-parenting relationship, stating how if Sebastian had anything, his dad would be there, yet cheering him on, which I absolutely believe. Yes, they did say that, Meg. They did, and they said, that like he's not in any extracurricular activities, but if he was, his dad would be in the front row. They said that, they have a great relationship, and that didn't really change over until probably around the time of Smiley Stories World, right? Because then, Seth comes out and he tells the news anchor, like, I didn't realize that my son was being abused until I heard it on a podcast. And, that was absolutely shocking for me because, I didn't think that he did know about what was going on, right? Because I think he would have done something about it. But it was shocking that that's when he heard about it, right? Was on the podcast. So, oh, Carla. It's okay. I'll just change it over, I am Two Bear says, has America's Most Wanted has America's Most Wanted ever interviewed the guilty party? It makes me wonder. It makes me wonder because we just witnessed it. No, I'm just kidding. We can't say that, but it is it's questionable at this point. I mean, because I always thought they knew what they were doing. Excuse me. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's odd. It's odd. Yeah, I thank you, Susan. Yeah, or Suzanne, excuse me. I always call you Susan. I shorten it. Um, Says, yes, Lady Freedom, that wasn't fair for Seth. Well, and two, I think it's like they just like panned over to what the other parent said, and they're not really on the same page, Um, so yeah, Suzanne, thank you. The M word, yeah. Yes. The America's Most Wanted interview was very disappointing, and that says, yeah, it was a little bit too short too. I wish it was longer, and more in depth. And then I wish the panelists had a more in-depth analysis, based on more facts and things. And Megan L says, there's something wrong with you when you allow the man you are married to go on YouTube panels making jokes about your missing son. In my opinion, big hell no if it was me. Absolutely. And there's no reason for it, really. I mean, nobody wants to hear it. Everybody's shocked by it. It makes us all sick at our stomachs. It's like they just... I don't know how Katie allows for it. I don't know how she thinks it's okay. Maybe she finds it to be like funny herself or endearing. It's not, in my opinion. It's not. It's sick. And like you said, I would not want to put up with that. I am T-Bear says, the America's Most Wanted had no mystery, no hook, nothing that would have piqued my interest or made me Google it. Flop. Well, and I can see that too. The only thing, I think the saving grace was, feeling Seth's raw emotion. I think that will help a lot. But I wish they would have put up one of the billboards, even Who Took Me. That would have been a good one. That would have been neutral, that they could have put up there. And Bab says Chris lied when he said he told Seth, I don't know how to tell you this, but Sebastian is missing. Again, downplaying the situation and his role, in my opinion. Yeah, that's a great point, Babs. I mean, I agree, and they're always distancing themselves from the situation. It's very, telling behavior, especially because that's what people do when they don't want, involvement and things like that. We see that all the time, downplaying it, complaining about being harassed, that sort of thing. Oh, it's Little Miss Sharon says it's a beautiful autumn afternoon here in Victoria, Australia. So I'm going outside to get some vitamin D and ride my horse. Oh, how wonderful, Little Miss Sharon. I'll rewatch. Have a great night. Thank you for being here, Little Miss Sharon. You enjoy yourself. We all need that, right? That's so important. I think that falls under self-care, to just go out and do something you love to do. And horses, they always talk about equine therapy and how it can be so wonderful. So, oh, that's great. Um, yeah, Bab says I am too bare, me too, sounding like he's innocent. Brenda says the original America's Most Wanted would have Mr. Walsh looking into the camera saying they're going to find out what happened to Sebastian and told the perp they were coming for them. I wanted to see that. Amen, Brenda. I agree. I agree. We needed some John Walsh in our life. He came on afterwards, and they did the actual America's Most Wanted, not the 3-part series, the 3-week series that they're, having that event. But I agree. I wanted to see that as well. I definitely wanted to see that. Hey, Veronica. Good to see you. No worries. Thank you for being here. Lil Redo said it's like they could not give the facts out to the public. Seemed weird. I agree. A lot of the facts were changed. Again, because we never heard Katie say that she was, that she thought that he went with someone, because they were saying that he didn't have any friends, which I hate saying that because I don't think that's true. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me anyway, just seeing what a great kid Sebastian was and is. But, just looking at past footage and things like that, that's kind of, where it takes me. But I don't know. I just don't think that we did get as many of the facts that we all know to be true out there. They need to listen to CP's nasty rants all over YouTube, Gypsy Doll says. Gypsy Doll, that's why I made the video of the nasty rant, and then of Seth, kind of his rebuttal to it, because I think it's important that people do see that. They need to see all the different sides of Chris and how he can be when he's on the YouTube streets versus when he is on, like, say, America's Most Wanted or Nancy Grace or one of the news outlets. He doesn't act the way that he does when he's on those panels, right? He even, brought Seth into the mix, and, we see that very often, and I don't know why he feels comfortable doing that, but he does. Yeah, Bab says Brenda Calvert, how could they do that when the perps are the two they interviewed? That's true. That's true, Babs. And that's what makes it so difficult, because this time we are witnessing people who, and they're changing the narrative to fit their story, when we really want to focus on the facts, and that's what's most important, is the facts in this case. It doesn't matter who we like, it doesn't matter who we don't like, it doesn't matter who, those little things like that do not matter. What really matters is the facts in the case. The facts in the case is that Sebastian was last seen at the Texas Roadhouse. He came home, and there are some grainy footage of him taking the trash out. Some believe it was Sebastian taking the trash out, others do not. I do believe that Sebastian made it home from the Texas Roadhouse that night. And with that being said, believing Katie's story that she asked him to go to bed at 9, she let him stay up a little bit later that night, and that was the last time she saw him. Those are the facts, as we know them. But those weren't presented as such. It was basically, again, trying to form a narrative that would make sense to the public. And it doesn't make sense, because they're leaving out details, and especially to people who have been watching the case, it was a huge disappointment in that regard. But, many of us are in agreement that, Sebastian's case got out there to a lot of people, which is really important, because if they do decide to follow up or find out more information, or, search Sebastian's name, I believe that it will bring them to a lot of the stuff that, we know to be true, and, a lot of Chris and Katie's words. I think it's going to bring exposure to that. And Bab says a no admission of Chris saying to Seth at the vigil, "What happens if this goes south?" Conveniently left out. Absolutely, Babs. It was conveniently left out. The fact that the parents had never went to one vigil on that side, right? Chris and Katie did not go to any of the vigils. Chris showed up to that one vigil, but he said that he was going to work with Seth. And then we saw that unfold. It didn't happen. We just didn't see that. Seth tried, and Chris wasn't giving up information. He was, as a matter of fact, they decided to go look for bikes, right? The night that Sebastian had the vigil, and he was honored by the school for agriculture classes that he had taken. And Chris and Katie were at the motorcycle shop. Katie looks like, a schoolgirl, excited. It's just not becoming of a parent who's missing their child. Hey, Ann Reynolds, good to see you. And Robin407 says, "I think America's Most Wanted panelists kept the sides out of it and kept it neutral. I'm sure they all have their own personal opinions." Yeah, I agree with that, Robin. I can definitely see that. Keeping, and you would have to, right? In that setting, it's not like, because you might have a rogue panelist here or there. But that's what it would be if somebody was just to come out and be like, "Well, I think the Proud Feet did it." I wasn't expecting to see that at all. So I think you're right. They were leaving their personal opinions out of it, and they were trying to step back and have a more objective kind of look at things. So yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, SCP Foundation. I was like I was watching it like a hawk, even though I knew what time it was coming on. I was like, I don't want to miss it. Yeah. Bab says, Loretto, of course the dad's, excuse me, of course I've been criticized. The dad's been criticized. LE has been criticized. What the hell does that have to do with Sebastian being missing? I agree. And Sebastian himself has been criticized. Let's not forget that. Because we went over Justin's live not too long ago, I think it was last week, where we discussed how there were people on X disparaging Sebastian and speculating as to why he had to wear a belt, was wearing pull-ups because Chris made him, and we heard from Seth himself that Sebastian wasn't allowed to have underwear at their house, that he was only allowed to wear pull-ups at their house, and that Chris gave him Sebastian's underwear to because it wasn't allowed at his house. What about Sebastian being criticized? What about the allegations that Chris himself called Sebastian the R word, and then he readily uses it in his vocabulary? And if you didn't get a chance to watch the video, I know it's a lot, and it's crude, violent language. I get it. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important to listen to that and think about how it is seemingly part of Chris's regular vocabulary to use that word, and knowing that he allegedly called Sebastian that, I think that people need to know that. I think it's important not to hide that. If you don't want people listening to you say it, don't say it. There has to be a level of accountability, in my opinion. And Robin407 says, anytime you have CP and KP telling their story, it changes and it gives investigators more, in my opinion. Yeah, that's a great point. And that's another silver lining. This is another story change. This is Katie telling America's Most Wanted, in my opinion, what they wanted to hear, right? That Sebastian could have, been taken. She's never said that before. You know, I think on Nancy Grace, when asked about her theories and pressed on the issue, she did say that. But it's always flip flopped. And Veronica Truly says, I think it was set up by body movement, however you spell it. Yeah, due to C saying he would only go on a big broadcast. OMG, everything was changed. He walked out that door, liars, in my opinion. It was all different, right? It was completely different, and even much different from what they said, even a year in. It was completely different. Um, yeah, Lil Redo, I know what we're all worried about, Seth. I understand. Yeah. Um, just a health FYI, a person can get the flu twice, just diagnosed again today. Oh no, many variants going around, I was told. Oh, Babs, I'm so sorry. Thank you for letting us know, though. That's important. I didn't think that there was the flu around. My goodness. And Brenda says, will the true Chris Proudfoot please stand up? I know you all saying that like Eminem. Will the real Chris Proudfoot please stand up? That's so funny, Brenda. And Veronica Truly says, who was the panel with Truth confront CP about his truck? Yeah, we watched. She was on there. That was the first time I heard of Body Moving. I never knew who she was. And then I was informed that I did know who she was because I watched her documentary, but I didn't know it was her at that time, right? Because I did like the documentary. Don't F with Cats was her documentary on Netflix. Really, really good documentary. But yes, I do remember her being on that panel. Mama Bear says it'd be cool if someone could do a comparison and contrast back to back Chris's bipolar sociopath, in my opinion, personality video compilation. I'll try. I'll work on that, Mama Bear. That one would be an easy one, it really would be. I mean, we've heard so much, nonsense out of him. And, um, just to be fair, we haven't heard that much nonsense out of Katie, but we've heard so much out of Chris. He's very um, apt to go on a panel and he wants to break the internet. And then, you'll have people that are placating him and egging him on and saying, oh, you're breaking my internet over here. Oh, and patting him on the back and giving him an attaboy for acting a complete fool. When at the end of the day, they're just really, in my opinion, using him for content. They're not, that's not respectful to allow somebody to do that either. So I think at the end of the day, Chris doesn't realize that he's being used for content as well, because he's not making money off of breaking the internet. The person, whoever is on, has the channel, that's getting the views, that's getting, the ad time and things like that, the super chats, blah, blah, blah. Those are the people that are making money, right? So is that the incentive behind letting the nastiness happen on their panel? I would say yes, in my opinion, because it just makes logical sense. Vic, I think he was home as well. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no worries, Anne. Don't be worried about being late. That's fine, guys. I don't ever worry about you guys being late in here. I love when you guys show up and, show out, we talk. And Lainey says, it felt like a half-assed reporting of a case and them letting them control the narrative. And I don't believe he made it home. Not one of those dogs traced his scent from the night before, in my opinion. Well, that is true. Lainey, that those are some of the facts. And I agree with that. There wasn't any scent. There wasn't any sightings that we know of, right? Just the flashlight video. So, that is very possible. I know that it was said that Katie had some sort of a device in her car that would have picked up audio and video, and that was turned over to the police, allegedly, according to them, I Am Two Bear says, I do not think he made it home from the Texas Roadhouse. I think KP passed him off to CB and Alaska trip as fishy. Okay, I am Two Bear. That makes sense too. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, they would have to have done a quick pass off, for her to get home in about 15 minutes. Most of the routes that they would take, because there's 3 different routes to get from Texas Roadhouse to the Proudfoot residence, and they're all about 15 minutes long. Anyway, we kind of smash it. And, JLR did do that drive, right? The 3 different routes. Yeah, Veronica truly says for half a second, and then they went to the motorcycle place. Yeah, I know. And Katie didn't show up there, and it would have been really nice to have her just up there to receive the award on Sebastian's behalf. It was really disheartening. Little Red says, did I hear somewhere that CP said they were living their best lives? Oh no, I don't know if that was said or not. I sure hope not. Oh, how awful. And those are the little things that he says to really tick people off. You know what I mean? It's almost like we almost shouldn't even give him that satisfaction, And Bab says, question, did anyone notice that Katie refers to him as Christopher? Nina in her interview called him Christopher, and others call him Chris. I wonder if that's a sick demand of his woman. Oh, maybe, Babs. That's a really good point. Yeah, because, Nina did refer to Chris as Christopher, and then Katie does the same thing. Yeah. That's a good point. And Suzanne says, Vic, I think he was in the back when KK and Sebastian got home. Very possible. Very possible. Robin 407 says John and Reeve Walsh were at the police department or on TV constantly when Adam went missing. Can you imagine what they think of CP and KP leaving the home and moving into the RV 3 hours away? I wonder that, yes. And I wanted John to analyze Katie, right? Because I wanted him to, compare how his wife reacted to Adam going missing in her care, and I mean that with full respect because it's not her fault, in my opinion. But, how Katie's reaction was. And I really wanted to hear that, Robin. So, yeah, I thank you for your comment. And Bab says also he made Sebastian call him Mr. Chris. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And we didn't get that, right? We didn't get Mr. Chris on the interview. We got, Nancy Grace Chris, Aw, thanks, Annette. We love you, Anne. And Perfectly Imperfect Boy Mom says, Babs, I noticed that too. And so did I Am Two Bear. I know. What kind of nerve would he have to say that, huh, Vic? Yeah, and I'm not sure, but I mean, I can't believe he would say, living the best life kind of a thing, because that's, who would be living their best life. And Megan L says, well, we know CP moved not 1, but 2 of his wolves with children to Tennessee to be, or wives, sorry. Okay, so let me start over. Well, we know CP moved not 1, but 2 of his wives with children to Tennessee to be under the feet and socks thumbs. I agree with that 100%. We see the pattern there, right? Bringing the wives to Tennessee, to where Chris is very familiar with the area. Chris's family has connections there, and the women don't have anyone. It's very isolating behavior on both parts, And Cece says, in my opinion, all CP had to do to keep speculation off of him was keep his mouth shut. Amen, Cece. I mean, for real. Yeah, keep his mouth shut. But no, he showed us who he is by going on sleazy YouTube panels, usually drunk, unleashing his vulgarity. Really well said. And that's what it comes down to. I mean, there's a reason why we think negatively about Chris, and it's because of the way that he acts, his actions, going on the YouTube panels, acting crazy, acting, sleazy drunk. A lot of people thought that he was drunk in several of the interviews, and yeah, it just doesn't look good, right? It just causes speculation and drama and stuff like that. It really does. That's funny, Meg. I am T Bear says, so did he have a diaper on when he went missing? Did Katie make him wear diapers when Chris wasn't there? He didn't have underwear in his house, so. Well, and he got up and used the bathroom at the Texas Roadhouse, so that's another thing that's really, really odd because, you would think that, but then again, there was a lot of things that Katie was doing when Chris was not there, and I applaud her for this, right? Live how you want to live. Don't live under someone's thumb. Don't walk constantly on eggshells. You end up having to do that when you're dealing with someone who's very controlling. But I think that, it was important to note that Katie didn't keep the same rules about the dogs. She allowed the dogs to sleep with her. Also, when it comes to Sebastian, wearing the pull-ups, I'm assuming that, maybe she had a couple of extra pairs left over and maybe she wasn't making him wear them all the time. It sounded to me like that was something Mr. Chris wanted, Meg. No, that is a great, great question. Oh, blessed. Thank you for being a member for 2 months. Blessed to be a member of the best YouTube true crime channel. Aw, thank you, Bless. That's so sweet. We're blessed to have you. Aw, thank you. And Meg says, well, we know that CP moved not one, but 2 of his wives with children to Tennessee. Well, and I think the first one was there, right? And the second one he met in the military. And then, the third one he was military. 4th, and then Katie. Now, of course, Nina wasn't in the military. I know one night I was like having a brain fart and I said, I think she was in the military, but she was not. So yeah, definitely, Meg. I mean, and it's just an isolation tactic that we see very often. I dealt with it. Moved away from my hometown to Missouri. So, Cece says, is your son? Oh, yeah. Oh, Cece. Yeah, Veronica, exactly. Starting off the show with Chris was at work, right? He was in Memphis, so he possibly couldn't have had anything to do with it, When he comes into the equation, it's when she calls him first, But isn't it odd that she would choose to call him first? What is he going to do from 3.5 hours away? It's very, confusing. Oh gosh, autocorrect is so bad. Sometimes it works out, but most of the time not. And Megan L says, I've met plenty of men like him myself. It's sad that there are so many. Yeah, well, and it's sad that they, I think a lot of it is overlooked in society. Like, oh, that guy's just a jerk, that guy, we don't like him or whatever. But it's also, very sad how much a narcissist can come into the picture and really become like an insidious factor in a relationship, in a household, in everything. Once the mask falls and the love bombing stops and all of the, you're so beautiful, you're so this, you're so that, all of that stops. And as much love as he put out is as much hate as he's going to put out. It's just an inevitable thing. And it's a mental illness, narcissistic personality disorder is. So, I am Two Bear says there is always 4 to 5 variants and the shots rarely address the most prevalent one. Yeah, I agree. I am Two Bear. I agree. Aw, thanks, Meg, for hitting that like. Vic says, my friend texts, I got a new girlfriend. Her name is Evie. I'm like, oh, so happy you met evil. I'm like, what the fuck? Vic, that's funny. Oh, no. And the girlfriend's looking over. Oh, she just called me evil. Oh my goodness. Chris is a tool, Babs. I agree. I agree. And I am Two Bear says, but it feeds his ego. That's his payoff. Exactly. Oh, he loves it. He thinks he is so famous, when most people don't even know who he is. And if they knew the true Chris, like what if the real Chris Shady would please stand up, we would, they wouldn't like him. Most people would be very off put by Chris's behavior. I mean, there's people that are applauding it and egging it on, but they're getting money out of it, so they're going to do that. um so Mama Bear is so kind. Bless says, Megan Ellis, thank you, my friend. You are a blessing to us all. She sure is. You guys. Michelle says, but fact is, last person to hear from Sebastian is KP. Both dad and stepdad was at work. That's weird. Mom didn't call 911. Stepdad had to. I agree, Michelle. And I also think it's weird that she didn't call, Seth first. Because, I mean, that's what I would have done. Even being someone who doesn't have the best relationship, right, with the ex. But if our child was missing, I would, especially on my watch, I would be calling him first. I would be calling the police, and then I would probably let my husband know, what was going on after the fact, after I got the authorities involved. So that's kind of how I would do things. But, I understand not everybody would, um, and Robin says, in my opinion, attention is more important to CP than money. He likes to be in the spotlight. I think so too, Robin. And he's always talking about how he's breaking the internet, and I'm sorry guys, but I'm breaking the internet tonight and all of this stuff. And it's like, okay, yeah, great. I'm glad that you feel that way, but it's about Sebastian. It's not about you, and it never was about him. I mean, hell, he wasn't even home, Um, thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Little Redo. That's funny. Vic says, stupid phone. I could be stupid on my own. I know, right? Me too. Me too, Vic. That's funny. And Veronica truly says, and most of those people that he goes up on from in the beginning thought they were guilty and had something to do with it until they figured out they made more money being by being on their panel. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Veronica. Because I didn't know that at first, and I kind of thought a lot of times the channels would be, maybe trying to like cozy up, get information. And I thought, but it just seems like they're enjoying the money too much, Sorry, I don't want to cough on you guys. But yeah, that's a great point, And Mama Bear says, Clue comes out hoping he'll pop on a pathetic look. Yes, I took a peek. Real weird channel, often forcefully inserting curse words where they don't fit just for shock value. Yeah, literal value, crooked money. Right. No, and that's true, and a lot of people do really well with being like a shock jock and that sort of thing. But, it's another thing when they're bringing the parents on and allowing them to act like so crazy. So I agree with you, Mama Bear. That's a great point, and inserting the curse words when they're not even, they don't fit into there, right? It's very strange. And the rage, and then also just the way that Chris like appeared to be speaking in tongues at one point, or he was like, hey, yeah, hi, yeah. Like, it was really weird. Like, I honestly have never seen anything like it before, nor do I really hope to, No, Suzanne, there's not going to be a part 2 on Sebastian's America's Most Wanted, unfortunately. No, it was just that segment, because they're going to bring in other cases too. Right. Oh, very true, Gypsy Doll. He has no brains. Everything is recorded that he says. Well, and that's the thing. He'll just turn around like he did in the courts and say that that wasn't really him, and that's why he hides behind, the avatar. Um, because he can say that really wasn't me, and then a lot of times we're seeing a lot of things getting deleted too, after the fact, but of course the internet is forever. So I mean, there's certain things he's not going to be able to, get rid of. Even if they do get rid of it, somebody might have clipped it. Um, and Brenda Calvert says all his shoes were home, and I do think he made it home. I don't think KK would have lied about him taking the trash out, knowing he would be on camera. She wouldn't have known it would be grainy. Well, that's true. That is true, Brenda. She wouldn't have known what the camera would have been like, or what it would catch on there. I mean, I know she's very tech savvy and she's very big into the communications and things like that. So, but I think you're right. I don't think she would be able to, know that or foresee it. Um, Gosh, I hope not. That's awful, Annette says. Well, I don't know. There could have been camera jammers used. I did kind of go over that theory a little bit. And, it's really easy to make the homemade jammers and things highly illegal. You're not allowed to do it. But, again, it's a possibility. Um, oh, Cece says my husband's name is Chris. I never call him Christopher. Not unless he's in trouble, right? No, I'm just kidding. Say his full name. Bab says, and Chris refers to Katie as the mom. We have mom worried about her kid. I've never heard Chris say Katie's name in an interview. Yeah, that's strange. I mean, I think he said it one time when he was yelling at that one person for calling into Queen Bee and being like, um, oh gosh, how did he put it? He's like, where's Sebastian, Katie? Yeah, that's what he said. Where's Sebastian, Katie? Why doesn't the caller just ask that flat out? And he got all mad. We have heard so much stuff from all over the place, Loretto. We have. Hey, Kiki, good to see you. Good to see you. And Veronica says, why am I gray? LOL. I was a member. Gonna rejoin. Oh yeah. Okay. Yes. Aw, thank you, Veronica. Yeah. Oh yeah. I agree. Slimy thing. Yep. Gypsy Doll thinks she's copying Nina. That is possible. I think there's a weird vendetta with her and Nina. And I could be wrong, but it just seems like there's something weird with her and Nina where Katie just does not like her whatsoever. And, kind of wants to snatch her baby and stuff. It's weird in my opinion. Suzanne says, in my opinion, was premeditated by both. I agree with the premeditation. I do think that it was premeditated. Bab says, CC, exactly, he's a pig and he's shown us his true self, intoxicated or not. And I agree with that, Babs. That is not an excuse for me. Just because somebody tells me oh, I was drunk when that happened, I don't care. You were drunk when that happened, you're high when that happened. No, that's no excuse, learn to handle your booze. If come on. It's just that's not an excuse, right? Because I mean, I get that there's people that truly have addiction issues and things like that. And, a lot of times it's very difficult for them to quit or whatever it is. But in the same way, it's just not an excuse. If you know that your behavior is amplified and you get to that point where, you're doing bad things when you're drinking, then it's time to not drink anymore, right? Because it's bad for you. It's bad for everybody involved. So no, that's not an excuse because it's a choice to, so. Veronica says there was something Kay said at the end of that America's Most Wanted. What was it? Something weird? Anyone know? At the end, she said, I thought it was just weird that she said, did someone take him? Or did he go with someone? Because that's not what she was thinking at first, because they said he wouldn't go with a stranger, even Seth said that. That's true, Mama Bear. I agree. It takes a basket case of a man who enjoys dominating a young boy or young man, and Chris did that to Sebastian for years. I agree. Well, and he tried to do it with Nina's kids and his own kids, but Nina didn't allow for it, right? She's like, I got to get out of here. You could tell that she, had loved Chris at one point, and that she didn't want to leave him, but she also didn't want to deal with the abuse, and especially from her kids. That's a good question, Suzanne. Does anyone think KK is afraid of CP? I used to think that she was. But then I heard her on the phone call between Heather Cohen, the PI, and, Chris. She did not seem afraid to tell Chris off. And as a matter of fact, she was very feisty during that, and I'm not saying that feisty people don't get scared, right? Because that wouldn't be fair. But I don't think so anymore. No, I think Katie is just as involved in the whole situation, with the bullying and everything and allowing for it and things like that. I think she was on board and not afraid. And Veronica truly says, I don't think she's afraid, not at all. And Gypsy Doll says, I don't think she's afraid of CP. She's afraid of prison and maybe his family. Yeah, that's a good point. She probably does fear, the family and what they could do, Vic says, I blame KP the most, who's let someone treat their child that way. Yeah, and I mean, it's hard not to. It's hard not to be like, how could you let him be treated that way? How can you go along with it? And that sort of thing. I agree. And Michelle says, I get the feeling that CP ran military type household with everyone who lived in his home. Yeah. And, I can overlook some of the things, if it was like more of a military style household, of course, they're both in the military. But I do believe he was kind of like taking on that role of drill sergeant and maybe taking it too far, which, some people do that, especially if they have that overinflated ego, they just can't help themselves. And Kiki says, I don't, Suzanne, I feel, in my opinion, they fought against each other. I mean, it seemed like they were fighting, you know what I mean? Vic says, no, it seemed like she was, fine to tell him off and be like, no, that's not the story. You said it wrong. And then they're going back and forth about Sunday being a school night. And she stood her ground, and he was the one that eventually backed down, in that particular conversation. So, yeah. And Bab says, Suzanne, I kind of thought in the beginning, but I think they're afraid of each other now with what they've done and their knowledge. I see Katie as ruling the roost, so to speak. That is such a good point. That is sorry guys, I had to move that over. That is such a good point because, I think they both know that either one of them can wreck each other or one another at any point in time. And, I think they do fear each other. And I think it's because of the guilty knowledge, in my opinion, and what happened to Sebastian. I think they were both in on it. And so, in that regard, yeah, Babs, I mean, who's gonna tell the truth first, really? Who's gonna roll first? So that's a great point. And Gypsy Doll says CP could have looked and sounded sad and we may have believed his nonsense. Well, and that's another great point, if he was trying to convince anybody. But he even said himself, he's like, I'm sick of being nice and I'm sick of playing by everybody else's rules. And it's like, you mean the rules of human decency that we're expecting out of you? Like, it's not anybody's rules. It's just the way of life. Like, treat others the way that you want to be treated. But you're not doing that, and it just pains him to have to treat others the way he wants to be treated. Because Chris wants to be treated with respect, but he doesn't want to give any respect. Chris wants to be treated with respect, but he doesn't want to have to earn anybody's respect. That's the huge difference, in my opinion. you know. And Mama Bear says Chris met his match with when he met Katie. Couple of wicked souls, in my opinion. And, you know, and that does happen. You know, there's people that are out there and they find each other and they'll do anything, they ride or die, you know, they'll do whatever for the other person. And, you know, they're thick as thieves. You know, it's not even one is afraid of the other. They both have dirt on each other, you know. And I Am Two Bear says, "Oh hell no, I cut her no slack. She allowed all of this from Chris. She sucks worse." Or is that a word? Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you know, and that's the thing. Like with moms and stuff, we're gonna see that and be like, you know, we wouldn't allow our kids to get treated that way. It doesn't matter, you know, what it is. And then that says, "I thought that at first, Suzanne, but as I've heard more of KK in the background, I don't think so." Yeah, the phone call really changed my viewpoint, you know, on Katie, because she wasn't backing down. She wasn't afraid. She didn't seem like, you know, Chris, whatever Chris says goes. It sounds like whatever she says goes. And that was a very big, shocking moment for me because, you know, I've always kind of said that I wonder if Katie is in fear of the sour socks, right? Or the flying monkey socks, you know, and Chris's pull and things like that, because we know that, you know, they're about Chris and not about Katie. And the minute that Chris is going to get thrown under the bus, they're going to throw Katie right under the bus. So I think she's got to be afraid of that. You know, I mean, she would be silly not to fear for that, right? Because I mean, that's just kind of what could happen, you know? Yeah, it had to be next to Mama for sure, Kiki. I agree, you know. Definite mama's boy, Babs. Oh yeah. Yeah. And Robin says, "Mama Bear, I agree. If KP didn't have some hold or knowledge on CP, he would have moved on to number 6 by now." I agree. I don't think he would have been putting up with this. You know, I mean, there's been a lot. And, you know, I'm not gonna you know, say that there hasn't been. I mean, I'm sure there has been a lot that has been said, and I just don't see him sticking around unless he had involvement, and that's just my opinion, especially when we know the track record, you know. Mama Bear says Kathy B never cut the apron strings on Chris. I agree. I agree with that. Bab says, "I Am Two Bear, exactly. Anything that happened to Sebastian is because of Katie. She is his mom, and he was abused, neglected, and disappeared under her watch." I agree with that, Babs, you know. And that's the thing that Katie tends to forget, and it makes her mad, you know, but it's like those are the facts. You know, those are the facts in my opinion. He disappeared under her watch. We know that there was abuse in the home. We know that he was left, you know, by himself quite a bit to kind of fend for himself on things. She talks about him rummaging for snacks, things like that. You know, yeah, Kiki, I agree. I couldn't imagine how Sebastian had to walk on eggshells. Absolutely. You know. Cece says, "KP is not afraid of him. I think he's afraid of her and what she may say, but I think that he has told her to keep her mouth shut so they don't both go to prison." Yeah, and I mean, that's a really big fear, you know, and I mean, her slipping up so often and things like that, it's just, you know, really weird, you know. And Suzanne says, "I wonder how it made his mom feel at court that day." Well, and he was being so rude to her and yelling at her too, allegedly, from what we heard, you know, from people who were there. And Mama Bear says maybe her conscience is bothering her so badly it's seeping through the pores on her face. Very possible, Mama Bear. Very possible. And because it's going to come out. You know what I mean? It is going to come out. It is not... you know, it's not something they're going to keep under wraps for long, right? Because the truth always comes out. It just takes sometimes it takes a little longer than we want it to. And I Am Two Bear says, "I don't know men like that, but I have had friends who have fallen for them. I'm too independent and just a plain bitch. Only my cats can boss me." That's, you almost have to become that way, right? One of my favorite sayings from Dolores Claiborne is, sometimes being a bitch is the only thing a woman has to hold on to. But, after you've been in, crappy situations and things like that, and you've had people treat you bad, you kind of get a thicker exterior on yourself, right? You put that armor on and you're like, yeah, no one's going to hurt me again. And, it's important. Not only for self-preservation, but just, self-respect, love, showing yourself the worth that you deserve, because nobody deserves to be treated that way ever, ever. And Bab says, Mama Socks is over there shaking her head, and I think she's tired of protecting her baby boy by his bad decisions. Katie made the decision with Chris's ultimatum, in my opinion, and now they're all culpable. I mean, I think that is absolutely true. And really well said, because if we're looking at it from the outside, I think that it would get tiresome for any of us, right? We all love our kids and we'd want to do anything for them, but it's got to be really exhausting, bending to Chris's every whim. And a lot of times people will go with what the narcissist says and does, because they fear them, but in this case, I don't know that that's true, because I think we're dealing with a lot of different personality disorders without being a doctor, just allegedly, in my opinion, so. Oh yeah. Thank you, Veronica. Bab says, I am Two Bear, same here, no cats, but I learned about 7 years ago, wised up, and decided to have my own peace, and my life doesn't revolve around pleasing anyone but me. And that's such a great point, Babs. That's what it's all about, because, and it's not even to the point of being selfish, but just making sure that you're okay, right? Because if we're not okay, then how can we be okay for anybody, like our kids and things like that? And I had to learn that the hard way too. That it's like, care for yourself, because a lot of us will do and do and do and do for other people, but we don't take the time to stop and take care of ourselves. And it's so important, because we're not doing a good job of taking care of others if we're not well ourselves, so thanks, Annette. And Cece says, in my opinion, I think CP colluded with a certain hate trash channel to throw distractions, even to expose Seth's email about putting him in an institution with their idea. When it was their idea. Absolutely. And, that's something I kind of wanted to, do a little bit of a discussion on one of these days, is kind of the different schools and things like that. It really bothered me knowing that they tried to put Sebastian in a behavioral center versus a center for children or individuals with autism, because I think that's where he would have had more benefit. And I don't know why they would put him in a behavioral center to begin with, because as we saw in the Texas Roadhouse footage, he was just very well behaved, and we don't see those types of children who are in need of a behavioral center, which I don't know what I think about those places, because they can be really, really harsh, and there's a lot of kids that get abused, and ultimately some of them lose their lives going to places like that. And so, I don't know what I feel about how they are helping or anything like that. I think it's just kind of a money grab. But a lot of these places are very secretive, and once they get your child there, it's just all about the money, from there on out. But I think that you're right, Cece. I think that, it's very obvious to me that the collusion exists between these YouTubers, and also them putting negativity out and blaming Seth for things that he had no part of or didn't do. And especially when it was their idea, because in my opinion, I can see that Seth was very focused on making sure that Sebastian was well taken care of with his chromosome deletion, and then also with the newer autism diagnosis. I think he was focused on what was right for Sebastian and what he needed. I don't think Chris and Katie were. In my opinion, they wanted Sebastian gone, and they didn't want to deal with him anymore. And that's my opinion. Vic says, Suzanne, really, who argues like that in front of the courthouse? What a bunch of arses. I agree, Vic. I am Two Bear says, high five, Babs. It's so much more peaceful. It is. And protecting your own peace is so important. Oh my gosh, because it's your oh, thank you, Meg. Thank you so much. Then it's your mental health and your well-being that's affected. Um and I am T-Bear says, did anyone catch that courthouse fight match on tape and posted? I didn't see it. Who and about what? Well, no one has posted any videos of it, right? Because you did have part of the people who were involved in the court date that day were upstairs, and they didn't want to go downstairs because the people, on the opposing side were down there arguing. And so no one wanted to go, out the front doors until that was done with. So there were people watching it unfold, but I don't think anyone got it on camera, which I'm so surprised, with the way our devices are, glued to our hands, that nobody got it on tape, um oh, thank you, Lil Redo. The iPhone link. I know they're different, aren't they? And Robin says, cursing to make themselves look mad, big and bad, and then they're offended. Right. Or they play the victim, Robin. That's what gets me. It's like, you can't, go off on somebody and then be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're mad at me or they went off on me, So, it's crazy. And Cece says, I am still confused with Terry Lynn swapping sides, or was there all along? Well, see, and that's what I can't figure out, Cece. I've been trying to kind of figure that out too, a little bit here and there, because it's strange to me. But I know that there were connections before that, with Terry Lynn and the Proudfoot side. But I didn't necessarily find that to be a bad thing. I mean, you live in a town, you grow up in a place, you're gonna know people. Even if you don't know them personally, you might know of them, or you might be an acquaintance or something like that. But I'm still really confused about that whole situation too, because I do think it was something that could have very well been from the very beginning and infiltrating the other side. I do think that that is a very strong possibility just based on what I know, and things like that. But it's super confusing, and it's not the only time we've seen people do that in this case. Not to defend her actions, of course, but, we've seen that happen a bunch of times, different people. And I think a lot of times people were trying to cozy up to other people and get information, because you have to be really careful about that too, because not everybody's, looking out for the best interest of, Sebastian's case, or, they're looking out for what information they can get, what kind of part in the spotlight can they get, which is really sick in my opinion. And it's not fair. Oh, did they have an outdated poster, Michelle? Why did they use the old poster before FBI updated? Date disappearance 226, reward only 50,000. Did they not do any checking? And who provided the outdated poster for America's Most Wanted? That's a good question. Yeah, I know. And I don't know if they did any checking. I think they might have just taken, their word for it. It certainly seems that way, and then also, I really would have liked for them to include dogs, portion, because it's a $500,000 reward that, At Night and Dog the Bounty Hunter put up $50,000 reward for any information to the FBI. And that's the reward that the FBI put out. So I don't know. I wish they would have added that in there, because it would have just enticed somebody more to come forward, you know. And Robin says, you would think that there would have been a video of that. I would have thought so too. I'm very surprised that there wasn't, you know. I am Two Bear and Meow also wonder the same thing as Cece. And I am Two Bear says there has to be Robin. Making a child come up missing is highly illegal, Vic says. I agree, Vic. And Cece says, what makes me think of Terry Lynn was someone bringing it up, the courthouse brawl, and she was in the thick of it. Yeah, well, and, you know, Clue said that she was sitting in the courtroom behind them, you know, and then she said across the pond or across the aisle, there was, you know, Bullhorn Betty and the other people on that side of the aisle, right? But Terry Lynn was saying she never went to the courthouse. But then we actually see it on the next court date, exactly what Clue was, you know, had stated happened. And so, you know, I mean, it's always going to be cloudy when you have people who are liars. You know, they're bold-faced liars. They're trying to make themselves look good. And, you know, that's what we see with Terry Lynn, you know. I mean, you know, if you were to tell me, you know, 4 months ago that I was going to be, you know, taking Clue's word for over Terry Lynn's, I would have been like, no way, you know, but here I am, because that's what we're seeing. You know, we saw that happen in the courthouse. Yeah, in my opinion, it's premeditated, Robin, you know. And Bab's saying Katie videoed Nina running through the airport on live on Facebook when she was served with papers in her car after the handoff. Katie is pure evil. I agree with that. Only a bad person would take joy and want to film someone else's misery, and that's my opinion. You know, I agree, Babs. Only a bad person does that. Those are not the actions of a fair and noble and, you know, strong, kind person. Someone with integrity doesn't do things like that. They would say, no, I'm not going to participate in that, you know, because that had to have been horrific for Nina, you know. It's just crazy, you know. It's just not good behavior. And she did the same thing when they were harassing Nina about doing the handoff with Faith when she was a baby, you know. Fab says, y'all don't even think that Katie is a shrinking violet. She helped torture and threaten Nina. Yes, Fabs, I agree. And, you know, I mean, I've tried to, you know, play devil's advocate for Katie plenty of times, and I kind of can't do that anymore, you know. Just the Dateline interview, the America's Most Wanted interview, she knows exactly what she's doing, and she's doing it to cover her own ass, in my opinion, you know. And there's people that are going to cover her ass to get the story out, you know, of Sebastian. And I think that, you know, if the ends justify the means, then more people have awareness of Sebastian, you know, but it just, at the same time, it's definitely a double-edged sword, you know. And Veronica says, I can remember when they all attacked her, Terry Lynn, and she was crying all about them to someone else. I watched it, and now she's back over there. Yeah, and that was another thing that was really, really hurtful in the community, you know, was seeing that, because, of course, you have people that are sticking up and saying, how can you do that to someone who's searching for Sebastian and who genuinely cares about Sebastian? But then we find out that that's probably not the case. You know, because two of those two things cannot be true at the same time. You can't care about Sebastian's case and be playing games behind the scenes and, you know, playing grab ass with the other side and doing those sort of things. That is not helpful, and that is very, in my opinion, backstabbing, manipulative, and ultimately a betrayal of trust. You know, for her viewers, for everyone, you know. And to say she wasn't even in the courthouse and, all this. And then she comes out and says, well, you can't tell me who to hang out with. It's not about that at all. It's about the picture that you've painted for this whole entire time, and then the 180 that you did. And again, it's just about accountability. It's not about hating somebody. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes poor decisions in life, right? That's how we learn. But yeah, that kind of thing, it's not going to fly with me, because I was part of that community, and I was part of the people that were, sticking up for her and saying, how dare they do that to her? And then, come to find out, she's, buddies with Crabtree. She's buddies with all of them, you know? I just don't think KP ever bonded with Sebastian, period. And that's very possible, especially when they're little, that's the prime time to do that, right? And so that could very well be with Katie being deployed and things like that, Yes, Veronica, it is. It's a $500,000 reward now. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And Babs says, Seth even said, Chris, we know who wears the pants at that house, and I've always believed she planned everything and is responsible. She is the one who was last with Sebastian, and she allowed it all to happen. I agree. And I don't think that we can let her off the hook that easily, I really don't. Meg brings up a good point, afraid of losing that lifestyle, I mean, she enjoys that lifestyle. She enjoys, being like a little child with Chris, like we see up in this picture of her. She enjoys that. Yeah, Robin, I agree. KP tries to come off as mild and meek, and it's all a persona, in my opinion. And we see Katie's different personas over and over again, the different accents, the different personalities, the changes in demeanor. It's all very, very odd behavior, in my opinion, Aw, Vic, see, that's because you're a good mama. You don't let people treat your kids that way. I loved him. Seth said Sebastian is more of a man than CP. Oh, that was classic. That was classic, Meg. Really good stuff there. And it's the truth. It's the truth. Um, you know. And Cece says, Carla, I think they are broke. Mama Socks is probably supporting them, and Chris seems to have much time on his hands to hang with his YouTube buddies, a rumored apartment. His toys cost money. Well, and that's true. And, it doesn't seem like I don't know if they're living at the house on Stafford, or if they've, moved to a different location, if that was an Airbnb. I still don't know. It's pretty much up in the air, Um, and Bab says, CPS Katie, his mom, totally failed Sebastian, and she didn't want to raise a teen. She could only deal with a child like whom she married to. Just my opinion. I agree, Babs. I do. And Suzanne says, is Nina the only ex that has come out and said anything? To my knowledge, yes. There were other exes that have said things. There are also records of the other ex being very badly injured by Mr. Proudfoot in a domestic violence situation. And Carla says, CC, right, he can't be working. Do they have a GoFundMe account? Well, and they very well might. They might be getting money from, or their Cash App shared or something like that, which, I mean, if they were out searching, that would be one thing. But, I mean, he's never been nice to Gypsy Doll. No, he has not. Cece says, I don't think they have a GoFundMe because they criticize Seth's, plus who would donate to them. Yeah, well, that's a good point too. I don't know if they do have a GoFundMe or not. I don't. Hey, Detroit Rock City, good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Katie is the fool that let Chris get away with saying she was home alone, but they never thought it would come to this. They knew it would be swept under the rug. I agree, Carla. I agree. And Bab says, Suzanne, I don't think so. It was a police report found, but her name was not revealed, and she has allegedly a restraining order for life against him. I did hear that too, Babs, by the way, I did. Gypsy Doll says Mama Socks is probably the one who did CP's hair for that interview and gave him that the lame flippy do. Oh my goodness. Oh, his hair. It's just always something different. His appearance changes every single time. It's so weird, you know? Carla says Babs, wasn't it said Mama Socks paid her a bunch of money if she's been quiet or stayed in the military? Oh, maybe so. Maybe so. And Detroit Rock City says the look on her face, her actions at Texas Roadhouse tells me she can be a real bitch, in my opinion. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I heard she's the meanest, the Mama Socks is. I heard she's absolutely mean. You know, and, you know, it just kind of goes to show. I mean, we've kind of seen those actions, you know. Carla says Detroit Rock City, yes, you can tell she thinks she is Queen Bee, but she's not. A man I work with gave me a t-shirt that said I was Queen Bee. Carla, that's funny. Yes, I think number 3 and Nina was number 4. Yeah, Rachel was the one, I think, that I heard, you know. Vic says my last ex sitting on the floor packing. I was standing behind him. He kept turning around looking at me, and I said, hey, get out from behind my back. I just laughed and was very proud of myself. Vic. Yeah, so he can't take any crap, you know. The pesky cahooting cahooters. Hey, Kathy Bartholomew, good to see you. Thank you for being here. And Bab says, Carla, Chris does nothing but lie and gaslight. He does it to he's done it his whole life, and that is a learned trait, and Mama probably has too, in my opinion. Yeah, and it is a learned trait. You know, you kind of learn how to be real manipulative and gaslight people very early on, right? And especially those are tactics used by the narcissist, you know. And Detroit Rock City says she was filming Nina and laughing while Nina was crying shows her real mean girl personality, in my opinion. Absolutely. Because, you know, just nothing about that is kind or nice. You know what I mean? Like, that is the meanest thing ever. And it does show her true colors. I agree. And Megan L says maybe if these behavioral schools parent can't even get a hold of anyone to see how their child is doing. There are so many complaints with these places. Absolutely. Yeah, Meg. And that's the thing, you know, I mean, it's like, I think the schools is something that we could explore. I don't know how, you know, it would fit into Sebastian's case, possibly, but the secrecy behind all of it is really what gets me, you know, because those places are very secretive, and once they have a hold of your kid, it's crazy. You know, talk about gaslighting. And Carla says, I get the feeling that Katie thinks she is so tough after the military. She is bad. Yeah, bad AB. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and she is a tough girl, you know. Vic says what KP did to Nina was unbelievable. Shame on her. I agree, Vic. Just terrible. You know. Suzanne says, I'm pretty sure that the courthouse has cameras. I know, but you know, they won't ever give that footage up. But I would have loved to have seen that. And then I would have loved to have seen the officers go out there and be like, hey, you guys need to break it up out here. But they didn't, because it was described more as like, you know, like a more tense kind of like argument, right, or disagreement. It wasn't anything that was completely crazy, but there was yelling involved, according to the people that were there, you know. But I'm surprised that it didn't get caught on camera somewhere, you know. Many maybe hugged late. I know. I'm about to kind of hop off of here. But I'm glad we were able to talk about things, and I want to do some comparisons too. So I'm going to work on those for tomorrow night's show, because I didn't get a chance to do it. Oh, Annette says I've been a special needs teacher for 30 years. In my opinion, Sebastian doesn't fit for school. center, those positions are usually reserved for students on the highest level of disability. That's a great point in that. And, I would tend to agree with that, and I wonder if that's why they were looking at the behavioral schools. So that makes sense to me now that you've said that. Um, yeah, maybe that's why, that they were looking at those instead, very, very, very possible. Very, very possible. Oh, thank you, Mally Cat, for gifting a Lady Freedoms Raw Narratives membership. If you got a membership from Mally Cat, make sure you say thank you and welcome to the Dragon Tribe. Aw, cool. I didn't see that one, I don't think, earlier. Cinderella says bingo. And Carla says, Michelle, I said in another chat, it's time to turn up the heat. Like they did Mel Gibson in the movie with the shower and left electric cord. Tell him start talking. Yes, or Man on Fire, Hey, Joni, good to see you. To me, she looked stoned in her interviews. I'm not convinced drugs aren't involved. Well, and that's what I'm wondering about a lot of the people in that area, the locals. I wonder about, math being part of the equation. Um, and that says she's very manipulative coping mechanism for someone who's experienced trauma. That's a great point. That is a great point. Cinderella says it's so sad. It is. Bab says, why haven't they been questioned, deposed on record? I don't know. I don't know, because I think any of us would have been hauled down to the station for questioning if our child went missing out of our home, Vic says the devil in disguise, in my opinion. Hey, Mountain Mama. Mountain Mama says Chris's hair changes as much as Katie's accent. That's so true. That's a good observation. I agree. Yeah, in my opinion, they pled the fifth allegedly. That's true, Cinderella. Yeah. Oh, glad to have you, Kathy. Thank you. And Bab says, yeah, can they do that day if they want to, but have they been questioned and deposed? I don't believe they have. I really don't. I really don't. Saying nothing shows more than saying anything. I agree. And, even with the billboard that says, silence is red rum, it's like, it's the truth, it really is, in my opinion. And then that says, I don't understand that either, Babs 22. Surely they can bring them in and interviewed separately and put pressure on them until someone cracks. We've seen that situation in many cases. That is so true, Annette. And I think that's part of the confusion and part of the frustration that people have with this case. It's like, what's going on and how come nobody has done anything about it, Carrie Starr says, I don't think they can afford a home. That's why they decided to send him to Seth's in the end before he disappeared. I believe it was foul play accidentally and covered up or otherwise, in my opinion. That's a good point. Those are very good points, Carrie. And, they did say it was ultimately too expensive. I mean, let's be honest, those places are very expensive. Now, I don't know how much the military would have covered, and things like that. But Michelle Scott says, courthouse cameras caught that melee, I'm sure. Lady, watch the American Most Wanted. You'll hear wrong date, wrong amount for the reward. And did CP and KP give them that poster? I'm sure they did. If it was an outdated poster, I'm sure they got it from, that's just my speculation, but I'm sure. Thank you, Detroit, for hitting that like button. Oh, no worries, Sammy. I know. I'm about to hop off here, though, so I can get this stuff. Veronica says, lady, did you see where I put her weird statement? Oh, no, I didn't. Did I miss it, Veronica? I might have missed it in the chat. She's had a lot of weird statements. I mean, just kind of left and right? Oh, great. That's a great point, Sammy. Thank you. Sammy says you only get deposed in the civil cases. They were questioned in the beginning, and now since they have an attorney, I'm 99.9% positive that the attorney will tell them not to talk. I mean, it's just smart strategy, right, Sammy? I agree. And thank you for clarifying that. You're absolutely right. You don't get deposed in like a criminal case or when you're being questioned. Civil cases is when, there's depositions done and things like that. So thank you you know, for pointing that out because that is right. Or that's correct. And Bab says, I wonder if the military courts are aware of all this. We've speculated on that before, and I really don't know. But I would think that they would be. Um, Good night, Kiki. Good night. Um, Don't do that. Nothing else to watch. I'm sorry, Vic. I know. Well, I wanted to have some more clips for us. You know what I mean? But I wanted to do some comparisons and kind of show, what they said, and then here's something else they said, and kind of compare them for us. So I kind of want to work on those too. Um, but that's so sweet. Thank you guys. And I always have such a great time talking with you all. I tried to be a little bit more prepared, but there was so much information out there. And there's still a few interviews that I wanted to listen to in terms of what Chris was saying, kind of right around the court and different things. I don't know if they're all out there or not, but I'm going to go look and see if they're still available. So it is very strange indeed, Detroit Rock City. It is. Oh, okay. Veronica says this year has been the worst nightmare I could have imagined to come alive in her statement. Yes, I do remember her saying that. And isn't that a weird choice of words? That is absolutely odd for someone to say that. Or Chris saying, I wouldn't recommend, anybody, and then he catches himself. It's like, well, yeah, of course you wouldn't recommend it. I mean, who would recommend losing their child or their child going missing? It's so weird. Um, all right, guys. Well, I will talk to you all tomorrow. Thank you all so, so much for being here. Very odd, Veronica. Absolutely weird. It's like, what is going on? Um, it is. It's so weird. Oh, Kathy Bartholomew says, in my opinion, my thoughts on the America's Most Wanted interview was disappointing to say the least. I wonder if they even looked into the facts of Sebastian's case. It makes me wonder too. It makes me wonder too. Thank you, Robin, for being here, and thank you for your great discussion as well. Oh, good to see you. I got changed. Thank you. Blessings to you too. Yeah, and thank you all for being here. We'll have something really interesting to talk about tomorrow, and we'll definitely talk about the case. And then, of course, I still want to go over Hunter's interview on the Summer Wells case, because I think that one is going to be a really interesting one if you haven't heard it yet. And I just learned so much from you guys when we talk about Summer's case. There's so many diehard people that really love and care for Summer, and she's still out there missing, so we need to talk about her. Good night, Vic. Good night. Good night, Ann Reynolds. It's so nice to have all you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. Good night, Carla.